months. I went up Eastern, down to Mill Creek, all the way around. I was like, and I
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Let us bow. Father, we thank you for this evening. We thank you for the beautiful weather that you provided. We ask that you be with each one of us here tonight. Help us make the right decisions for our city. All these things we pray. Amen. I just wanted to thank everybody that had sent a card or came by or talked to me and our families. We've lost 2 family members in the last week, so it's kind of a tough week for us. But certainly appreciate all your support, and I know most of you, and it's been very gratifying having your condolences. Thank you.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
I want to have a comment.
Yes, sir.
Thank you. I just want to apologize to council and to our citizens for missing 2 weeks ago my absence, which was the second council meeting in the 3.5 years I've been on the council that I've missed. I had a personal family obligation. It came suddenly on Thursday afternoon, and therefore I made the decision to take care of my family, and I received grief from numerous people questioning my ability of not showing up. I just want to let them know I'm thinking of them.
Thank you very much. Obviously, I think you made the right decision, and it was just sort of a perfect storm of things that happened at the last minute. We knew Bill was going to be gone there for some time, but it just, things happened. Jack had a death in the family, and Beresford Ford had sickness in the family, and I think Mr. Rush was actually ill that afternoon. So just sort of a perfect storm there that created that situation. So anyway, we'll move on from here. I will entertain a motion to consider the approval of the agenda, and if there are any council introduced topics to be discussed, we'd like to include those in the agenda as well.
So moved.
Have a motion to approve the agenda. Have a second. Any other discussion? If not, there was, you want
Yeah, on the old business item G. They were here last time and didn't get to present their case, and I would ask if they be moved up to the first item on old business.
would, Mr. Cummings, would you
So amended.
amend your agenda to
So amended
for
to move.
item old business, which is 9G, to be moved to 9 at the beginning of 9A essentially.
Yeah.
But
So moved.
okay. And we have a second on that, so any other discussion? If not, those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. All members voting for the motion. Okay. You have in your package the council meeting minutes for May 16 and June 6th. Is there any changes, deletions, or anything regarding those? Not, do I hear a motion to approve the minutes?
So moved.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes.
of course I was not here.
Yes, okay.
On the first part, yes. On the first.
On the May 16th, you would have been here,
Yeah,
right?
yes.
Okay. Let's do the May 16th. Theoretically, we didn't have the 6th minutes.
That's the question I have, is do we really have any minutes if we don't have a meeting?
I think you had a meeting. You just didn't have a quorum to transact business. I think there was.
So the minutes, the meeting basically reflects. How do you approve that?
Well, it would, because that doesn't require 3 votes, the 2 who were here can pass it. It would be the majority of them.
All right, I tell you what, let's do. Let's have a motion to approve, if it's your choice, a May 16th council meeting first.
So moved.
Have a motion and a second. Those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Okay. On the June 6th meeting, minutes, do we have a motion to approve?
Motion to approve.
I think we only got one second, Mr. Huffman. Okay. Those in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Okay. Those present, which was Mr. Cummings and Mr. Huffman, voted to approve those minutes, since they were the only two at that point that were present. We have also in your package the FY 2013 April financials. Does anyone have any questions or comments regarding those? If so, Nathan, I'm sure, or Mr. Wood could answer those.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
I'd like to make a request of Mr. Wood or Mr. Ingram. The thing that that's not currently corrected or displayed correctly is under SPLOST 6 in the process of us going through and making amendments for specifically the Etowah Park and so forth. I believe we are shy $344,000 out of contingencies, and we have to have a budget amendment made there that by oversight was forgotten. I think Nathan, you and I talked about this, so we should probably make that budget amendment ordinance change and just run it through the process. So that'll allow him to make the adjustment to the actual budget figure under SPLOST 6. So did I lose it? I guess I lost some people, but.
That was the SPLOST monies going to the
It's not
park.
Etowah Park, I was wrong.
No?
It's the $344,303 for the bluffs. We have never made a budget ordinance amendment for the purchase of that property. It's just a housekeeping, as far as I can see, it's a housekeeping thing that we need to do in order to modify the budget so it reflects the correct budget amounts within the SPLOST 6 account or fund. Sorry, I misspoke when I said Zetto, it's the Bluffs Parkway.
Okay. Anything else? Anyone have any questions about that, or? Okay.
Not just asking,
I think they can do that anyway, just go ahead and bring it back to us whenever, since it's been purchased for a month or two anyway, you know, so. Okay.
I think, just a matter of information, we've had some internal discussions about the necessity, once the city has obligated those monies, about coming back immediately within a relative sense and adopting a budget amendment, or just waiting until the end of the year. Once you've committed those monies are committed. So, we don't have to, there's nothing wrong with it. We don't have to adopt a budget ordinance amendment every time at that time, but we can do that. I think we have been doing that, basically, but Nathan and I have talked about whether or not we need to do that quarterly.
I understand where you're coming from, but the problem is that when I go look at SPLOST 6 and I see in contingencies 700 and whatever it is, $38,000, and if we don't modify that, we're sitting up here believing we have funds to use and we could be voting for things. Actually, I'd like to see a change made in the overall process that we do, that when we come to council with something where we're allocating funds, that when it's brought, if it's already been budgeted, that if it is already budgeted, that the city manager provides us with the information where he's getting the funds so we could refer to it if we want to, or if it's an unbudgeted item and we're doing a change from contingencies, which I was going to compliment Mr. Beresford, because actually what he's done tonight or what he's bringing forth tonight on the amphitheater, he's brought at the same time as making the suggestion, the actual amendment to show where the funds are coming. And to me, that's the way it should be done, is that we bring the amendment at the same time we're voting on the issue to obligate those funds. And then it's nothing. But if I go look at, for example, if I use this as a reference point the balance in the budget from contingencies, if I look at it, unless I go through in depth the entire thing, I think I have more money available for future things, whereas I really don't.
Just to address that point, because it's something that I've talked with Mr. Ingram about as well. The only problem with doing that would be perfect if we did it that way, except an ordinance requires 2 readings. And so you've approved an action and then you're waiting for another reading for the ordinance. If we could go to resolutions for budget amendments and then clean it up at the end of the year with an ordinance one time, but adopt a resolution where then you can do the action and the resolution at the same time, change the budget for your reports, and then do by ordinance one time to clean everything up. But that would be the only problem, because we're doing it by ordinance.
Yeah, I understand.
I think
You
they
got
have to
2
eventually.
readings.
And you got 2 readings and you've disjointed with the action statement.
Yeah,
Mr. Mayor,
yes.
in the handbook from the Georgia Municipal Code, or whatever, talks about ordinances, resolutions, and other statements council makes when it comes down to budgets or the money trail. The state doesn't care how it's done. The state wants a money trail, paper trail, so that when audits come, they have document will state where this money went. And I would prefer to have that. We aren't there yet, but it's a resolution, because it doesn't make a difference one way or the other, other than the fact, time delay. When I get to that point, I'll bring these issues up again. But I want to have an open mind on that.
Okay. Anyone else? Okay. Next item. I don't think we have anyone that has signed up on the 10-minute public input, so we'll move to the consent agenda. The action on the Georgia DOT contract for Marietta Road construction. I believe the purpose of that was to authorize the mayor to sign that contract.
DOT contract and the
Okay. DOT and the construction. Yeah, that's section B, that's number B, but I don't want, we need to vote on those separately, don't we? 2 separate contracts.
We'll do it with the consent agenda.
It's a
Oh, that's right.
consent,
We
so
spend more time talking about the consent agenda than taking each item separately.
I'll make a motion that we accept the consent agenda.
Have a motion, second. Any other discussion or questions? Not, those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. All members voted for the motion. Okay, Mr. Rush is not here. Yes.
Mr. Rush asked me if I would.
Okay, so discussion of fire services.
Yeah, and I don't know what to say at this particular time. But where did we leave off on the fire service as far as the organization that was going to come in and do a study on how best to pay for it? Was that
I actually
defeated?
vetoed that.
That vetoed, and it was Stan's veto.
Right. That's my opinion, certainly.
Have we checked that out to see if that is correct in the process? Is that if we did not vote or did not have a meeting that's sustained?
At the night, I believe, Mr. Dyer indicated at that time that he felt like we had followed the procedures.
I'll explain it again.
Okay.
Because the charter amendment we passed on the veto calls for a special call meeting to be scheduled by the clerk, in my opinion, that's the time to do it. Because now what you have to have is another called meeting. A called meeting doesn't automatically roll over, like the work session rolls over to the regular meeting. Because it was a called meeting, somebody might call another meeting, and the charter doesn't allow that. The charter calls for it to happen right then. So the question, though, is that was just the budget amendment. The action was still the same.
Did you hear that, Mr. Mayor?
Yeah, I heard.
This is this dilemma that I was talking about. You voted to approve the contract, but now the budget can't be amended.
Listen, and again, that's where I'm trying to go, whether you use a resolution. Here's a good example of where we got a conflict, a problem, because the approval of the action was made, but we have no approval to pay for it, no funding approval for it. If the two had been submitted, whether it was with a resolution at the time with the contract, both of those issues would have been resolved, and we never would have, been in the dilemma we are. Now, in order to fund it, in my opinion, would have to go back to square one and start a new budget amendment and go through the process all over again. That'd be my opinion. But relative to that, considering that a lot of the things that we're not going to be doing, it was my intention when Mr. Rushwood came up with this, was to make a motion that we indefinitely postpone that study until we know what we're going to be doing with fire services.
Yeah, I thought it was ended up being sort of a moot point because things changed after the initiation and the idea of that study. And if you saw the reasoning that I vetoed it, that was part of it, that it may have been a good idea initially on the path that we were taking to build the new stations and so forth, but once the ISO rating came back and we didn't need to, it wasn't quite the emergency it had been, so to speak, there wasn't any need to do that because we didn't really know what we were funding exactly what.
To go further then on the fire service, now we're talking, I'll move to a different area of fire service. I think we've, the council is pretty much heard and has taken off the table any idea about building 3 new stations and funding it through bonds. I think that that side of it has been resolved. At the same time, and then we have a new committee, a third fire committee that's working to come up with what might be the best resolution for our situation. I think we're all in agreement that we're going to be working, and know that the city manager and our chief is working on the 3 rating with or without us, that they're going to do it. But with that said, there was an area in our study that came back from ISO that was a glaring weakness. And although we did have a good rating, thank you to our fire department, the glaring weakness was the one of 3 areas that's most important in the ratings. That weakness was manpower. And as I have said many times, that only people would put out fires, that brick and mortars do not. With that said, I'd like to say that we should continue on the path of increasing our staff at our city fire department. And I would like for this to be included in our budgets for next year, if it hasn't been so already, that we put this in. Right now, if we were to staff and have 3 men on a truck, most of the time would be, we need 9 new fire people. That costs us about $3/4 of a mill. We can forget about the 4 mills that have been kicked around over the past months. The 4 mills, that number is now gone. But $3/4 of a mill will put people on the fire trucks. At the same time, I've asked that we increase the number of paramedics. We have 2 getting ready to have 3, or is it 3 getting ready to have 4? Is Dean?
Getting ready to have 4.
Getting ready to have 4. And that we increase paramedics for obvious reasons, in which he's got another one, the 5th one, that will be starting soon to have that. But this is what I think we should be running in parallel, possibly with the committee, is that we go ahead and move forward with our budgets for next year to start adding immediately to our staff department. So I bring that up as for discussion.
You don't have any discussions, comments?
Mr. Mayor, having that heard just what I heard, I think it's appropriate that I'd like to make a motion on this study, since we're not gonna be funding 4 stations and we're not gonna be doing what's in that study, or we don't think that study's applicable anymore, I'd like to make the motion that we put that study on doing it or undertaking it on an indefinite hold until we decide that it is a necessary study to undertake. And that was that fire funding feasibility study. I see no need for it, and I'd like to make that motion, put that indefinite hold until we determine there is an actual need for it.
Okay, we have a motion, do we have a second? Have a second. Okay, discussion, Mr. Berryport.
It seems to me like that's what we've done. I mean, it wasn't voted on.
Well-
You vetoed it. It's a new issue right now.
I thought it was out.
Well,
So.
The only thing is, there was a contract agreed to by the council. And it wasn't, I don't have the authority to veto a contract. And so what he's actually saying is that either rescind or just postpone, not rescind, I guess, but postpone any action on that contract until such time as we have concluded that it's necessary and needs to be done. Mr. Murray.
Mr. Mayor? How much longer are we gonna postpone? I think most of us up here realize what's going on here is trying to wait this thing out until 3 of the council members roll off the council. And that's a political issue. And that's not a good reason. That's a wrong reason. I am saying that we have been short on people. ISO points that out. It's glaring. It is glaring. It is so glaring.
That's not the topic we were talking about, Darryl. We were talking about the funding study, not the personnel.
I understand, but
Oh, okay.
I don't want to put anything,
but, Mr.
the
Mayor, let me...
funding thing has been postponed.
Yes, but, Mr. Mayor, if they have a signed contract, and I don't know if you signed it and it's gone out, but if they have a signed contract, in theory, they could start that study, do that study, come in here and expect to be paid, and we haven't even agreed on funding it. And all I'm doing is I'm saying right now, don't start that study, because what you're saying is that study doesn't address anything of what you're proposing right now. You're proposing an additional staffing issue. You're proposing a funding method for it, and all the study does is determine how we're going to fund it, and you've already answered the question.
Okay, I'm sorry I misunderstood that.
And I don't really want to see that vendor undertake a study and come to us and ask for $14,000, whatever, $900 it is, and say, well, I did our work, here, pay me.
But I thought he said the veto took.
No, that only stopped
The
where the money was.
vetoed the budget amendment.
No.
The resolution and the contract was approved. So whether if I signed it or if I didn't sign it, this council approved that contract.
Did you sign
You know, I don't remember.
It wasn't, it actually been your signature.
Oh, it was?
The city manager.
Oh, okay.
The motion had actually been to authorize the city manager to sign the contract. That was the motion at the time.
But actually, whether one of us signs it or not, it's still a contract, isn't it?
I think once you approve it, if the work is done, we owe the money.
But that's why I think we should do a hold. I mean, I'll ask,
I think signing is a formality. Once the council votes on the contract, they're authorized to do the work. So
my preference would be to strike the whole thing, but what I'm trying to do is not get where we do a study for something we're not at a point where you're at a different age than that study's at. Then I don't want them coming in and presenting a bill. So put it on hold, do whatever you want.
we have a loose end right now that needs to be tied up.
That's right.
Mr. Beckman?
Follow me on this if you would, please. Thank you. The issue at point here is in SPOS 6, there is monies available with the fire department. So therefore, we signed off on the document, sounds like, we did, we voted for it. So if we have to fund it, that's where it's gonna come from. Now, I'll give you another example. You just signed off, Mr. Mayor, it was in the paper, about the street parking issue, downtown parking, $29,000. I don't recall having an ordinance or seeing an ordinance or anything else for $29,000. But we signed a contract with that group to come in and do this study. That money will come out of the street department if that's where it's gotta come from. But we need to have an ordinance or something to move that money. And that is what you're talking about. We're talking these different places. Once these contracts are signed, we voted for it, we agreed, signed it. Here again, there was no ordinance or no resolution or anything else saying, by this council, we'll pay the $29,000.
Mr. Mayor, we don't need it in that case because we've already budgeted for it in SPLOST 6 under, I believe it's going to be charged to streets, is it not?
That's my point.
Yeah, but it's already budgeted. In the case of this study, it was not budgeted, and it was actually taken from contingencies. It was not taken from any SPLOST fund. It was taken from contingencies, and therefore we had to amend the budget in order to take it out of contingencies and assign it to that specific cause, which we did, was vetoed, sustained. Now we've got an open, approved contract that they could go work and fulfill against when we have no authorization to pay that, but we would have a legal obligation to do so. Isn't that correct, Mr. Dyer?
Mr. Mayor, let's
Yes.
go back to the downtown parking.
Well, you know, the sales tax are in different categories. Contingencies, as I understand it, is a clump of several different categories, including recreation, police, fire, and all. And so my understanding is that that's a little bit of the difference there, is that you're taking it out of transportation for the study, but this one's coming out of contingencies. And contingencies is some fire money, some transportation money, some police money, some building money, and recreation money and stuff like that. So I think what that does is it tells you, gives you a little clearer indication.
Where's the paper trail?
I'm not the accountant here, I can't tell
Well,
you that.
You didn't vote for it. That's my point.
The better example to, I think, to understand it is the settlement of the lawsuit with Stacey Bailey. That item was not covered in the budget anywhere. So you had to put it in the budget somewhere. So you had to amend the budget to do it. The question always is it already in the budget or not? If it's already in the budget, you don't have to do a budget amendment.
That's correct.
That-
This study was not in the budget and was taken from another account in order to do it.
Whether it was in the budget or not, I don't know. Nobody ever really said it, but there was a budget amendment.
There was not a statement for downtown parking in the budget. It was streets, et cetera, et cetera.
Okay, we will have a
So
budget
we're-
amendment for that next month.
Well,
Good.
How do
where
straighten
we
that one
stand
out?
on
Yeah.
the motion.
Okay, we have a motion and a second,
Put on.
basically to postpone that action on that contract indefinitely until we decide it's time. Okay, any other discussion? Not, those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. All members voted for the motion. Okay. I did skip over one item here. We had moved the zoning case up, and I got one behind, so guess I couldn't read my notes there, but this is a discussion and action of Planning Commission recommendation, case number Z 1304-001, West Latimer. Mr. Wood, are you gonna handle that? Is Ken gonna handle that discussion?
Mr. Pat?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, City Manager Wood, council members. This is rezone case 1304-001, Melissa Castile, agent 4 West Latimer. Property is 810, 820, and a portion of 830 Marietta Road. The request was to rezone property from R2 single-family residential and R4 fee simple townhomes to R2A, two-family residential. There was a public hearing conducted by the Planning Commission on May 20th. The Planning Commission did recommend approval of the rezone as submitted.
So no conditions or anything?
No, sir.
Okay.
I will accuse myself from the vote because I never.
Okay. Anyone had any questions or comments regarding that? If not,
Motion to approve.
Second.
have a motion and a second. Any other discussion? If not, those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. All members voting for the motion.
Thank you, Mayor, council members.
Okay. Okay, back to the other thing. Discussion of ISO report, Mr. Cummins.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We've sat here on many occasions and talked about different viewpoints that we've had relative to the ISO rating and its relevance to insurance costs and how it's used by insurance companies. I've always been I guess the Lone Ranger that thought it had minimal or insignificant impact. And so I said, we can't be in Canton the first one to have multiple viewpoints as to the relative importance of an ISO number relative to insurance and relative to several other things. So after having research conducted by myself and a couple others, I located a study, the title of which is The Impacts of Changes in the Use of ISO Ratings by Insurance Companies. It's an applied research project submitted to the National Fire Academy as part of the Executive Fire Officer Program, which is part of FEMA. And I'm going to read some excerpts. This is available study to anybody that wants to go online and get in it. It was done by the North County Fire District in Monterey, I believe in California, who had, prior to this study, focused his operations and planning around improving the ISO service grade in an effort to decrease insurance rates in the district. Found winning the improved grades, insurance rates did not significantly decrease. Going further, the results showed that insurance companies established their premiums more on incurred losses, hazards in existence, and other factors rather than on the effectiveness of the local fire department. But it's quite an extensive study, so I'm just going through and taking conclusions. State Farm and other insurance companies have moved away from ISO rating. State Farm is the nation's largest insurer. They have 1/3 of the residential. They use a 5-digit zip code system to reflect prior claims experience in that area. Western Mutual uses a similar method to State Farm. One of the biggest issues was large industrial and commercial occupancies. And the conclusion of this study was that a large corporation is able to shop for insurances services aggressively, and they can demand concessions from insurers. And again, that ISO doesn't come into a major effect. In Virginia, there was a study done that any IS, and the conclusion of that, one of the conclusions, that any ISO class below 5 roughly gets the same insurance rates from the insurance companies that subscribe to ISO. It doesn't include the ones that don't subscribe to it. Fire losses. One of the reasons it's not as great a factor is that fire losses are not a very significant portion of the losses that drive homeowner insurance rates. Burglaries, thefts, wind, water account for most of the claims. There's another reason they don't use ISO. Many insurers still utilize ISO, but others have moved to a zip code system that determines the premium based on history. There is an economic savings in what they call the PPC class, because the PPC is really, we're using ISO to define the class. PPC is actually the number 8. ISO is the organization, and it's a public protection class, I believe. But there is economic savings, improving down to 6 or lower. But once at that level, there is little likelihood that insurance rates will drop further with further improvements. And again, State Farm uses a zip code. And again, this is on zip code, so I'll skip. I don't want to take any more time more than to read the summary. State Farm agent Eric Silvers, I don't know who he is, Personal Communications, stated that fire losses, this is on September 8, 2006, stated that fire losses are actually not a very significant portion of the losses that drive home and over insurance rates. Insurers repeatedly stated that PPC numbers from 1 to 6 were pretty much the same as far as they were concerned. Rates climbed the farther away from a fire station that a resident was. It certainly appears that a direct relationship between the fire department capabilities as measured by ISO grades and decreased insurance is a myth, at least in part. ISO is frequently used in determining commercial insurance rates and for building and for the business that occupies that building. However, there's little difference in insurance costs at a PPC of 5 and a 1, so there's not a valid economic motive for taxpayers to want to pay to improve their fire department once it has obtained or achieved a PPC below 5. Installing a sprinkler system has more of an impact on commercial insurance rates than the capabilities of the local fire department. Business and industries are not likely to factor in the capabilities of the local fire department because it cannot be assured that the local fire department will be effective regardless if they have a PPC of 5 or 1. In summary, it appears there is little valid reason for approving beyond a 5. And the recommendation was investigate and consider other strategic planning strategies instead of using ISO. It is clear with a PPC of 4, the district is likely, and that's that particular, is saving as much money as possible for its constituents in insurance premiums. It is unlikely that investments in lowering the PPC will produce significant direct economic insurance savings rates. And closing that out, and looking at our ISO report, it was, and we looked at it at committee, and we've looked at it, I guess each one of us individually looked at it, we were approximately 1.5 or 1.6 points short of being a 3. And an ISO 3 does have a validity. And the validity is it boosts the morale of the fire department because it's a point that they can point to and say that if they have a 3, they're in the top 6 or 7% nationwide. Instead of a 4, they'd be in the top 15 to 17% somewhere. So there is that validity. But from the standpoint of insurance rates, it doesn't do anything. We're only 1.5 or 1.6 points away. We can obtain 1.89 points by getting a training agreement with the county, which we should do anyway. It doesn't matter what our ISO is, we should be going to the county and working an agreement out to utilize that training center. And that training center alone will bring us, according to my calculations, now I haven't verified this with ISO, but according to the calculations that I've used on this report would bring us to a sufficient point to get a 3 on that alone. The last thing that I'd like to do is I'd like to talk about what ISO, what really would bring a lot if whether we're, I don't want to get into this discussion of what options we're going to do, but if we maintain the city's fire department, we are more credible by going for fire department accreditation and then we are working on the ISO. And there are many different organizations that publish criteria and standards that can be used to measure the effectiveness of a fire and efficiency of fire department. Insurance Services Office, the ISO, and the National Fire Protection Association both provide specific criteria and standards for a fire department to measure itself against. However, these criteria are very limited since they both focus primarily on firefighting and fire prevention related activities. Accreditation, the Center for Public Safety's Excellence Commission on the Fire Accreditation. It's an international program, CFAI, and I'm sure I know Dean Floyd is aware of it. They provide a comprehensive, all-inclusive self-assessment program that measures the aspects of a modern fire department. I have additional studies about accreditation, one from the University of Tennessee, that further indicates that accreditation is the way to go. And the mission of this CFAI is to assist the fire and emergency service agencies throughout the world in achieving excellence through self-assessment and accreditation in order to provide continuous quality improvement and enhancement of service delivery to the communities. They do the entire breadth of the fire department. The reason I bring this out is if we go to our own statistics, and I don't know how much is, being that ISO only measures our firefighting capability and our fire prevention capability, I don't know from our quarterly reports how much is, what percentage we could classify in terms of our calls relative to fire prevention, so I didn't really include that. But relative to ISO, we had 39 fire incidences in the first quarter of this calendar year, which is 6% of our total calls. So we're using a standard that has a very limited scope to measure 6% of what our fire department does in actuality. Whether we keep our department or whatever option of fire services and we end up agreeing all on, my opinion is we should take the minimum route, which is get our ISO 3, but let's do it through the absolute minimum cost, which would be going and getting this training center online, an agreement with the county, and getting our fire personnel. I don't disagree with Mr. Huffman and relative to further training of our people relative to EMS services. We should be moving up, as Chief Floyd and I discussed it. If you look at it, they're really all EMTs, whether they're paramedic, they just have a different designation, whether they're an EMT B, which I believe is beginner or basic, and then you have an intermediate, and you got advanced, and you got P for paramedic. We should be continually working to improve our staff in those lines. But my suggestion would be, in budgeting and everything, we should be looking at the training avenue rather than the staffing issue. One last point, in the Fire Services Committee, looking in terms of expansion, forgetting again, I don't care who's doing it, we sort of came to the conclusion with a pretty open meeting that when we do expand, as has been stated by this council, our greatest need is in the Laurel Canyon area. And that should be wherever a station gets built, whether the county does number 9 and rebuilds it and expands their service there, whether we build a station up there. That was more or less the consensus coming out of that meeting, that was where our emphasis should be in trying to improve our service. And with that, I'm through with.
Mr. Mayor,
Okay. Go ahead.
I hate to belabor something, but I guess I have to. First of all, just a little bit more about ISO. I don't want to get near into the weeds as Mr. Cummings has, and I commend him on his diligence to study and analyze, but sometimes you can just go a little bit too far. But anyhow, there's approximately 44 to 47,000 fire departments that use ISO, or ISO evaluates throughout the U.S. And to use their words, virtually every insurance company in the country use ISO to some degree. When you have, and I've been in the insurance business, so I'm working a little bit here from knowledge. When you have something using, like you refer to as zip codes, let me ask, what zip code do you think our fire department works? What are there 2 fire zip codes that we work?
Probably.
Yeah. So it's basically the same thing. And there's where the game, the shell game. We only use zip codes. But the fire department somewhat follows the boundaries of the zip codes. They might be 2, 3, 4 zip codes, or it might be 1. It depends on a lot of issues. But so when they say we only use zip codes, well, the insurance company merely just applies the ISO rating up to that zip code. Then when the statement comes out that they say, well, anything below a 5 or a 6 is the same, who's getting screwed on that? Which customers get screwed on that? Because there is a difference. There should be. Now what happens is this. If an insurance company wants a piece of business and the agent knows his contact well at the insurance company, they can negotiate. And if they're basing their price on the ISO of 5, there's room to play if the ISO for that area is a 3. There's room to play. And if they want the business, they'll quote it. So we can't be too naive. You think the insurance, and I believe me, I was the first one to get slapped in the face when I went through the training and everything that goes, and then walk into the real world of insurance business. You think this thing is well regulated? Watch out. Watch out. They can wheel and deal, and it gets even more so with the commercial. What Mr. Cummings said, and he had some very valid points there. A thing like a sprinkler system in a commercial building is more valuable than a fire department. I would totally agree with that. I don't think anybody would find anything wrong with that. The area that I want to focus on is not getting into the weeds too much, is to get to one page on the ISO study that came back. And it's one that we already know, and it goes back to the people. It goes back to the people. Mr. Cummings is also correct, and if you look at the number of calls that our fire department has, I'm not going to argue the point of 6%. I know it's a low figure. Could be 6, could be 8, but still it's low. But the people that go out and make these calls, and you've got somebody trapped in an automobile, and you got 2 men on the truck and you need 3. Our city needs people. That's what I want most. They say, well, what about the study that says we need 3 fire departments or 3 more buildings, brick and mortar? That well may be. The city voted no. I'm still not going to stop. Just because they say they don't want the brick and mortars. The people are the ones that save lives. And we're getting brick and mortar mixed up a little bit too much here. We voted, I saw the vote, I understand the vote. The city voted. But when it comes to the people, I'm not giving up. There's where it's glaring, as our city fire department overcame the fact that we are understaffed by doing many other things to achieve the high rating that they did. But that don't make them look bad, because we don't give them the people, the staff, to do their jobs, to save our families. In an automobile accident, there's where most of a lot of the calls go. So I just think that we need to step up as a city, and as I said earlier at this meeting, that I'm going to propose that we add 9 fire people. It's going to be a cost of somewhere about $750,000, maybe a little less. It's not going to cost 4 mills. How we address the buildings, we can address one of them right away. It just depends on whether this council wants to move or not. If this council wants to build that, this mayor, and Mr. Cummings, Mr. Cummings does such a great job. I want to tell you, the man is brilliant. He does a lot of studying. But look at the big picture, guys. Look at the big picture. You can do all the studying you want to do. When it comes down and you got an automobile flipped over and you got somebody in there in dire need of help, and we got 2 people there. The counties know better. The reason that department fire out there, they had so many trucks, you know why? They only had 2 people per truck. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, Mr. Cummings?
Correct me if I'm right, but I believe we added 3 firefighters in order to obtain always having 3 on a truck. Are we in situations where we don't have 3 on the truck?
At times.
I think we need to talk to Chief Floyd about that. I think the point that I'm driving at is we have no sense of urgency to obtain an ISO of 3 because it measures such a little portion of what our fire department, forgetting about the staffing or whatever we're going, that's a different issue. The staffing to me is an issue. If we don't have enough to address the needs of emergency service, has no bearing whatsoever on ISO, but we shouldn't be rushing out and using the ISO number in order to substantiate what we do. Whatever we do should be substantiated by the need for public safety and our inability to currently perform or fulfill that need. That's what our staffing should be based on. Nothing else. Not the ISO, because us answering a truck call or an emergency call on whether we got an ISO of 9 or anything, if we've got enough people to answer the call over on 575, then that answers the need or fulfills the need, because the ISO won't change based on that call or any calls like it.
Mr. Mayor, I'll end my comments after this. It's getting too long. In the committee that you chair, Mr. Cummings, the first thing you said, we need a mission statement. And I don't recall the exact wording of it, but to have a quality fire department, you might be able to finish what it was, but basically I want to dwell on the word quality. And immediately I raised my hand, as he probably hates because I'm interfering, but I said, can we measure quality? And we want low quality, medium quality, high quality, and what is low, medium, high? And he said, well, we need to quantify it. And I said, yes, we do. How do we quantify it? The ISO study was 38 pages. Numbers, 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 and numbers. If that's not quantifying, I don't know what the hell is. We quantified it. And when you say make a call out on the highway, if we got enough people to to make the call? Well, enough people to drive the truck out there is 2. Enough people to handle the situation? Maybe not 2. They say 3. In order to go inside a fire, a house on fire, those firemen are not supposed to go in there.
That's 4.
That's right. So do we have enough people? The answer is still no. And we can sit back and talk about ISO. Yes, I am a big ISO fan. I'm not embarrassed about that. They 44,000 fire departments. Virtually every insurance company uses them to some degree or to a high degree. So it's a good system. But let's get back down to the facts. If we sit there and wait and wait and wait to get the buildings, we're still putting our citizens at risk. Add people.
I think I would ask, Jack, you have a comment?
I think there's some valid points on both sides of this, and I know both of you are on the fire committee with me. But response time and personnel really are the key factors here. And we've seen that we have really better response time than the county does. But we need to maintain that, and we need the personnel to be trained. And we need more, as Mr. Huffman said, more trained personnel. As Mr. Cummings said, we need some people to go through the county training. I think we need to do both of those things. But the people that are in those automobile accidents, they're counting their life by how fast someone gets to them. It doesn't matter if it's county or city. The fastest person there that can help them, that's where their life hangs. 8 minutes is not acceptable. And that's what the county rate is. Ours is about half of that. And we've seen that. So we need to give our citizens the best protection we can. And we need to train some people, both as firemen and as EMS workers. And then we need to go ahead and do it now. You know, it will probably give us a 3, and that will help bring in the economic boom. People want to move their businesses where they've got good fire protection. You can talk about sprinklers, and you're right, sprinklers do saw off a lot of fires. But if a sprinkler system fails to go off, and I've seen that happen, you better have some trained fire people there, or it's going up anyway. And they better be there in a hurry.
Okay. Get it in.
Last point, and then I'll quit. We keep using the county 8 minutes, and we use ours at 6, and whatever it is. But that's not really the issue, because if the station, whether it's a county station or whether it's a city station, if it's located at the exact same spot, there's absolutely no difference in the response time. I don't think the county's going to say, well, we're 8 minutes, let's wait 2 minutes to crank out the trucks. So it's the proximity of the station in terms of response time. Now, the county may be average overall in the entire county 8 minutes, and we're average 6 minutes, but I don't think it's a valid comparison for us to use, because the stations are going to be located, whoever does it, are going to be located virtually in the same places that are responding.
They're not, because the city is a much smaller area. We're going to have closer proximity than anything in the county. The county's covering a huge area. We're covering a much smaller area.
But they were going to condense, we got more people.
Yeah, more people in a smaller area.
Okay. Bill, go ahead.
I think the point is that if you do give it up to the county, we've lost control then of our 4 minutes, our under 4 minutes response time. There's nothing to prevent the county from spreading the wealth throughout the whole county. They can do what they want to. They can close the downtown station. They can pull firemen from in town and put them out at Sioux Tally if they need them out there. You're giving up your responsibility as a city when you give up your fire department, especially a fire department that's not broken. All this talk, you think we got problems with our fire department. We just don't, as evidenced by the ISO rating, which is the national standard. used by every fire district in the United States of America, or virtually. So the bigger picture, though, I want to make a point. Mayor Hubgood made a profound statement a few weeks ago. He said a process like this is not pretty. We've been beating this horse for a year and a half, and it's been ugly. 5 years, whatever. It's not been pretty, but that's what happens sometimes. And I see us coming together. None of us are that far off now in agreement that we've got a fine fire department, even better than we thought. I don't think any of us were expecting such a high rating. We were all pleasantly surprised. Some study that we did back in the past told us we're going to need these 3 fire stations. We've just been laser focused on that, arguing about that. It turns out we just don't. We just flat don't. We do need some more training, and we need some more people. We need to be long-term planning towards the stations. We have the properties that have been given to us, the Bluffs property we bought, but that can also be a multi-use property for a nice park. That was a good buy. We've not done anything that we regret on any of this fire. So let's continue moving ahead, looking at it. But let's acknowledge we got a good fire department, and I wish we would quit all this talk of giving it up and instead focus our energies on improving what we have and fulfilling our obligations to our citizens of protecting them and not giving it up to the county, because that's just the easiest thing to do. I will have to add one thing. I mentioned publicly a long time ago that my State Farm agent told me, I understand that ISO with State Farm, after a 5, anything better than a 5 does not change, but as he said, that also can be negotiated. But when I have constituents calling me and saying, I've got a document in my hand from my insurance company telling me that my rate's going to go up if the ISO goes to a 5, I mean, what can you say about that? So it is used. It is a yardstick, it is a measuring stick, agreed. Not all insurance companies look at it after 5, but some do. That's one piece of the puzzle, one part of the equation. But again, guys, let's keep doing what we're doing. You know, we're getting close to agreeing on the whole thing. But instead of this talk of giving it out and quitting being having a fire department, let's just improve the one we got.
Okay, well, it's my time, I guess. But I will be brief, I assure you. Basically, the mission statement, as I recall from the committee meeting, basically was what Mr. Huffman said. We wanted a quality fire service, but that was half of it, at the most economical cost. I think what we have to do is we have to decide what's the best fire department that we can have, the best fire service we can have that we can afford. It's the bottom line. It always comes down to that money. I mean, you're going to reach a red line there that you don't want to cross. So it'll just be more than people are wanting to pay. But up to that point, you know, do what you can. You know, you want a good fire service, and I don't think any of us want to. I don't think anyone wanted to just give the fire station to the fire service to the county just to be giving. It all had to do with the projections of the dollars out there, and that line is sort of faded away and blurry a little bit right now. But when we begin to look a little more long range, we'll get back to that, I think, and we'll have to decide how much more or how much can the taxpayers stand to improve that. I think we have to remember too that just some of the budget requests this time that I've seen from different departments, police department, 22% above last year's budget. That's the request now. Okay, I mean, Public Works, 22%. And I didn't even go in all of them, but they're way up. There's so many other needs too that we have to consider when it comes to what we can afford even for the fire. You know, so I think we have to maintain that perspective. But anyway, that's all I had to say. Anyone else, we'll move on. Okay. Okay, discussion of the city's 457 plan trustee and investment choices. Wood?
Yes, sir, this is actually, was on the agenda for the last meeting / non-meeting. So it wasn't discussed. We did in a management letter to you last month, leave you Mr. Castleberry's phone number for you to be able to contact him and ask any questions you had about it. Basically, what the council needs to do, and can discuss it tonight, we're not asking for action, although normally we would have, but to appoint 2 trustees for the city's 457 fund. Now, this is our defined contribution, not our defined benefit plan, the new defined contribution plan. And then to choose which asset allocation funds will be available to city employees. That will be a limited pool. Nathan, do you or Kelly want to offer any further explanation of this? Again, council may not have any questions. I know they had time to contact Mr. Castleberry directly. Does anybody have any other questions? Or?
I believe, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I think we were asking if the council would entertain the idea of establishing 2 trustees and have those 2 trustees go over the investment vehicles that would be offered to participants and let them choose. I certainly think it's an idea to have the council choose those investment vehicles. Mr. Geik is here to answer any questions regarding, who those trustees should be, or some recommendations, or answer any questions on those investment vehicles if y'all have any.
If I understand correctly, Nathan, you want us to designate 2 trustees, is that correct statement?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. I think we should do that, and I think in the recommendation it also said that we should not be elected officials, so in my opinion, the 2 most qualified to do it would be the city manager and the CFO as the trustees. And, if that's what we need to do, and take a vote on it, I'd like to make that motion that we designate the city manager and the chief financial officers as the trustees of this.
Let me ask the question, is indeed was that the recommendation that it not be elected officials?
That was the recommendation. It's not a requirement, but it simplifies
Okay.
things so it can ride through election cycles.
Okay, we have, I'm sorry, Jack, go ahead.
Is that typically people that are nominated?
Yes. And as far as the investment choices, that's pretty straightforward. Ned and I have recommendations there. We want a small list of choices so it doesn't confuse the participants. And of the 7 recommendations, one's a money market, that's required. So anybody who doesn't want any risk whatsoever, we go into that. And then we've got these asset allocation funds, so they don't have to choose large cap, small cap, international, whatever. They're different calibrations of risk and return. So we've got all the way from older folks who close to retirement want mostly in bonds, all the way down to younger people who need more growth in there. So we keep it simple for you. I think that's best for you.
That was our motion. Right, we have a motion in a second. Yes, yeah.
No, that's it.
Okay. Anyone else have a question or anything? If not, those in favor signify by saying aye. It was Mr. Wood and Nathan as the trustees, non-elected officials, the trustees.
But yeah, my question would be, does Mr. Wood and Nathan, are y'all amenable to accept that responsibility?
Yes, sir. Sure, you look enthusiastic.
Don't jump with joy.
Well, I mean, to me, it's not our responsibility to be taken lightly.
No.
Because you've got an obligation to a lot of employees, but I would certainly take it seriously, and I know Nathan would as well. And the other thing is, we've got a lot of other resources. Some of you got significant investment experience, Mr. Dyer. I mean, it's not as though other people can't give us input in the process, but certainly we would both take the responsibility.
Would I be wrong in assuming that due to your workload that maybe you would like another person to be nominated?
No, not necessarily. A thought may be that you, I'm not sure if council, as a matter of routine, wants to start directly appointing employees. I guess my concern a little bit more was in the in the direction of the appointment process. You might want to think about the city attorney and the city manager or his designee, in which case, I can tell you, my designee would be Nathan, but that might be an alternative to the recommendation that's on the floor, but we'll handle it either way. And again, if we need Mr. Dyer, if you stick with the recommendation that's on the floor right now, then we can call on various people's expertise if necessary.
And if I may add, council, it is recommended at least 2, but you can appoint 3.
Now, does this not have to be in any kind of ordinance form or anything like that to establish a board of trustees, or what is this?
Well, I think it's part of the contract with, we don't, it's really a contract action, but I don't know, I just saw it on the agenda. But this is just somebody that, this is not a daily task, right? So, I think it can be done by resolution.
Would we want to increase it to 3 in case we lost one?
You're scared me now. No, you're appointing by position. You're not appointing by personality. You're appointing by position.
And you can change that. It's just that they have, these are the trustees, they're the ones that review the options, and stand with you, correct me if I'm wrong, all they do is review the options that are made available to the employees. And they shouldn't be elected officials for the simple reason is we go through an election cycle, and once they get involved and they're familiar with the particular options, you don't want, because one of us isn't coming back or whatever that reason, you don't want that turnover in that process unless it's necessary.
We can always add a 3rd one later on.
It's never gonna be an emergency.
Never gonna be.
We'll always have.
I'll second the motion.
Man, it was second.
Sorry, just second.
Yeah, we got a motion and a second. Any other discussion?
No.
If not, those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, no. All members voted no. Okay, now the one we've all been waiting for. Second reading and action on ordinance to increase mayor and council compensation. I believe,
Yeah, I don't know which one's ordinance number 2.
oh, did I miss one?
Well, there's 2 versions. Remember, I was directed to prepare 2 versions, so that if you would just denote it by the effective date. One is effective, it says effective as the earliest date allowed by state law. The other one says effective January 1st, 2016.
The ordinance that I brought forward is for the effective date of January 1st, 2014, because the program that the current council is under expires with the retirement package that the council used to have, and thereby we're saving the city a tremendous amount of money by not having that golden parachute and doing away with it. It's ridiculous to have it in the first place. And now what we're simply asking is for the council to be paid $8,000 annually. The mayor shall be paid $10,000 annual for their services, to be paid monthly, 12 equals installments each month. The council member and the mayor is in office. That's my proposal, and it goes to effect January 1, because right now we're under the old system. And that's my motion for that to take place.
Okay. Have the motion, do we have a second?
Second.
I would have a question as to, would it go into effect January 1?
State law, it would become January 1st, 2014.
So this council would also benefit from that, correct? All members.
Whoever's
of this
still in
council.
office on January 1st.
Well, everybody be in office on January 1st.
No, some terms end December 31st, don't they?
No, nobody's term. It always ends at the first meeting. January is the way I see it.
Mr. Mayor?
The state law covers it. All this ordinance says is the earliest date permitted by state law, whether it's January 1st, January 2nd, January 1st at midnight, I don't know.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
We have brought this forward before. The state has laid out a program which we have followed to the letter and maybe beyond. And now what we're trying to do is create additional issues. The state says this is what we're allowed to do. Therefore, my motion is what the state says we can do, and I would like to call the question.
Well, we're gonna have, everyone hasn't had an opportunity to discuss it, that wants to discuss it.
We've been
If nobody
discussing
wants
it
to
for
discuss it,
umpteen
that's
months.
okay, we'll go ahead and do that. But until Mr. Goodwin, Mr. Cummins, Mr. Huffman, anyone has a chance to discuss it or make comment, if they wish not to do so, then that's fine. Anyone, Mr. Cummins?
Of course, mine's the alternative. If we vote, if his gets voted in, there is no motion on mine because the other would have preceded. And my alternative was that it be effective January 1st, 2016. And I don't know if we can do it, but I had two other problems with the way that there's an awful disparity between the council member compensation and the mayor compensation, especially now that we've eliminated the administrative assistant. So the mayor is doing a lot more than he had to do before. But I would, and I don't know if I can do that, Mr. Dyer, but on my particular option, if you chose to go that way, was it'd be effective 2016, and because we're waiting 2 years out, I'd like to change the amounts to 10 and 15,000 and show a greater difference between the mayor and a council member. But it's a moot point unless Mr. Beresford withdraws his motion or alters his motion.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes.
the referenced ordinance that Mr. Cummins has just mentioned has not been advertised for umpteen weeks. It's different, so it cannot be brought forward tonight for a vote. It's a separate ordinance. It has not been advertised.
I believe compensation, however, has been advertised. Does the actual ordinance have to be advertised?
Mr. Mayor.
If it does, then did we advertise any of the ordinances?
Yes, we did, but we
And
never
Council Board.
advertised the amounts. The ordinance was not advertised with the
I don't
amounts.
think the amounts were in the advertisement.
They were not.
I think the
And I might, unless I'm standing to be corrected, I believe you could change any part of that ordinance.
Right. We're dealing with two separate rules here. There's state law about raising compensation, you had to advertise that 3 times. We advertise all our ordinances by policy, but not by ordinance or rule, or, so there's different advertisements. But we're really dealing with the 2 readings. And I think you can amend the ordinance
Yeah.
at the second reading, so.
So, I mean, what I suggest, I believe, is legitimate or legal under both the state and our laws.
Because all we had to do under state law was say we're considering changing compensation.
All right. But anyway. Yes.
I'd like to bring up one point. I think I mentioned this before, but maybe I did. I actually checked with the IRS. Any elected official or anybody that wants to donate money to a municipality can do so, and that's a tax deductible event. So therefore, any elected official that doesn't wish to accept this raise or is opposed to it can give back any part of it, all of it, whatever you want to do. So there shouldn't be a problem for anybody that doesn't think they should vote themselves a raise. Just give it back. Just as soon as you get the check, you write the check back to the city for whatever you want to. Again, my point in being in favor of this is that I do believe it'll encourage possibly some younger people at the $8,000 would help. And if the next bunch doesn't want to earn that much money, they can always just give themselves a reduction, So let's get this done.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
I hate to go, but the IRS, you're right, it is deductible. The problem is that you have to look at is, number one, it's taxable first, and then it's deductible. And at the front end, it isn't that you can write it off and just say, I'm not taking it. It is income, and in order to deduct it, you have to itemize your deductions. And if you don't itemize deductions, as a lot of people may not do, it never becomes a deductible. It might not be a deductible enough of an amount in order to do it, depending upon a person's income. The other issue is those that are, it may be an incentive for somebody to come on the council, but those of us that are collecting any Social Security, the receipt of that will affect the amount of Social Security that might be taxable versus that which is not taxable, because now you've taken them over a certain threshold. So it's not quite the simple process of just saying, I don't want to take it and I'll donate it back, because you may donate that $8,000 back and it costs you $13 to do it.
Look at the glad to complicate it up. Give it back if you don't want it. It's that simple. Don't take it.
Right, and the same could be said for the retirement.
Yeah.
I think you can give that back too.
Yeah.
Although I doubt, is anybody here would give their retirement
No,
back right
sir.
now?
Not me.
Anybody here that would give their salary back that's increased?
Not me. How about you?
I don't believe
You, no, and the reason I wouldn't give it back is because I don't know what foolishness the council's gonna spend on studies that I wouldn't agree with later, and I'm gonna say it's a lot better in my pocket than in some contractor in South
If
Georgia.
you're really in favor of it, then if you don't keep it, just say you're in favor of it, vote for it.
What, now, did you, Mr. Cummings, did you ask for a change in the
I
ordinance
just
at all?
brought out that if we vote, it's a motion, mine is dead in the water.
Right.
He wasn't asking him to change, he was just saying, if this fails, this is what I want to do.
Okay. Any other discussion?
Roll call, please.
Okay, roll call, okay. Those in favor of the motion, Mr. Goodman? Yes. Mr. Cummings?
No.
Mr. Hutton?
Yes. Yes.
Right.
Really?
Yes, you. Okay. All right. So it was what?
4 ayes and 1 nay.
Motion carries. Okay, and next item, revised stormwater utility ordinance and stormwater credit. Are we gonna discuss that tonight, or, you know, that thing's could be pretty in-depth, to be honest with you.
Well, we would ask you to adopt it ultimately, so at whatever point in time you want to
We
discuss.
didn't get to adopt it, I mean, we didn't get to discuss it last meeting, so I think it's something that's probably gonna take a little bit of time to discuss. I would suggest that we move that to the work session in July, which would be, I think July the 11th, spend a little bit more time on it. Okay.
Do you want to wait till then for the first reading? You don't want this to be the first reading tonight?
I'd
Might as well-
wait
might as
till
well
then,
wait
let's
till
just
then.
make that first reading and move it right along there, because
So basically, we're tabling it till-
this thing is not quite an emergency, it's supposed to be, right? So, I need,
That was tabled.
I need a motion to table this, table it, no, not table.
Postpone till the next meeting.
Okay, we have a motion, we have a second. Those in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All members, no, those opposed? All members voted for the motion, okay. All right, action on the GFA loan for payment of Harmon Field emergency repairs.
We are asking you to take action on it.
Motion to approve.
This is a $300,000 loan. We have a motion and a second to approve that GFA loan of $300,000. Those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. All members voting for the motion. Update on unincorporated islands within the city. That was Mr. Rush.
Well, what about the large meeting?
Oh, I'm sorry, what else?
North meeting room bids.
Oh, sorry about that. Discussion of the large meeting room bids, Mr. Wood.
Yes, sir, that was discussed in the management letter of last month. Only 2 bids received. I think we had 6 or 8 people at the pre-bid meeting. Only 2 bids received. Those were in the amounts of $758,000 and $707,000 respectively. That's for the asbestos removal and renovation of the assembly room and including the audio visual equipment. Mr. Robillard is here. He was actually here at the last non-meeting. So he's here again tonight to answer any questions council has, but those are the bid amounts, so we need direction accordingly.
Question, do we really have any choice? We have to do the project, right, because of the asbestos and fact that it's being used for board.
Well, you could leave it like it is. You could leave it like it is, and how long we could exist with that, set of circumstances over there is anybody's guess. We have had ceiling material fall, and of course we've got some 4x8 plywood sheets that are bolted to the rafters of the building, holding up the ceiling quite literally. So it's not in the best of condition, but what level of danger there is right there, I don't know. There's been some discussion about the possibility of simply removing the asbestos and going no further. Mr. Robillard, again, could be more detailed about that than I can be. But basically, I think once you start removing the asbestos, you're removing the ceiling and you're into it by then. So to me, it seems to me like we either ought to do it or not do it, but not try to do half of it.
Are you asking for some action tonight?
Well, if it's your pleasure to go forward with it, tonight was intended to be discussion, but ultimately to take action one way or the other, yes, sir.
Yeah, I'd like to ask Mr. Robillard, in his opinion, the bids that we've got seemed high to me. I'm just curious what your opinion of it was.
I think they were a little high. We had 9 come to the pre-bid meeting, mandatory, and we hoped to have more.
We only had 2?
We only had 2 submitted bids. I talked to the low bidder, and his opinion was it's a very messy job because there's a lot of work involved. You have to get to the ceiling, you have to remove all the pews. It's on a sloped surface, so all the work is 30 feet up in the air. Has to be scaffolded. You have to move it back and forth. I can point out the question with just encapsulating it. What the situation is that basically have a 1/2-inch layer of chipboard that's attached to the underside of the trusses, and then what they did was they sprayed on a cementitious material, and it's adhered to the sheetrock. So that's the material that you have to remove. So you can't just take that off without taking the sheetrock. So once you take that off, you basically have an open attic situation.
Question. Did any of the bidders that declined give a reason that they didn't?
No, I didn't follow.
Can I answer possibly that question? There is a service out there called Reed Construction Consulting Services. I'm sure you're aware of them. And Reed had out there, basically it's a notification services that tells jobs that are available for people to bid or contractors to bid against. And they had out there a budget figure of $400,000. As we know, the budgets, all the bids came in the 750 or thereabouts. I had a contractor, sorry Mr. Rush isn't here, it was the one that did build my house that was going to bid on that. And he called me and said, I'm not going to bid that. I said, why aren't you going to go and bid that? He says, I can't do it for $400,000. He says, it's impossible. And so that could be the same reason we did not get other bidders in there, because they had using this consulting services as information. He says, I'm wasting my time, forget it, I'm not even going to bother to go bid it. He says the bid specific, their specs were, what, 200 pages approximately. He says it just isn't worth my time, because when I take a basic look at it, there's no way I can come in on the budgeted figure. So that may be a cause of why we only got 2 bids. They may not have used or seen any budget figure to start with, which there wasn't supposed to be a budget figure, but.
I'll say this relative to Mr. Bryan's question. And that is that the room is continuing to deteriorate by the day. So it's not ever going to get, you may get cheaper bids in the future. Nobody knows that. But in terms of there being less work, there will never be less work. In fact, there will be continually more work. I would say, Mark, is that an accurate statement?
It is an accurate statement, because if you go in there, all the paneling behind the front area is really cracking. And then
Warping and cracking.
Warping and cracking. The situation is basically that attic is an open air space with just a fabric to separate the two. And then up in the attic, you have vents that are open to outside. So all that hot, moist air in the summer just spills down into that space. And so it's been a lot of cracking due to non-use over the years.
And there's one other point too that Camp ought to be aware of, and that's my understanding from Mr. Robillard, is that about $200,000 plus or minus the total bid is for the AV equipment, which is a right sophisticated AV system. So the whole 758 was not all
Right.
asbestos removal.
Mr. Wood?
Wait, Mr. Goodman had his hand up there.
I was gonna ask you, in your opinion, would there be time to rebid that? Ask for,
I believe what you may want to consider, Mr. Dyer could weigh in on this, is you can value engineer with the low bidder and see if he's because a lot of times they'll have cost savings that they've looked at. So I think there's money in there that can be taken out. It just depends on the scope that you want to pursue. And Mr. Dyer could address whether that's, we do that, usually with the low bidder, you can enter into value engineer.
Mr. Beresford.
Thank you. Mr. Wood, I had asked you to look into the fact of breaking out the critical issue of the ceiling being replaced, leaving the AV issues and the dice and all the other nice stuff to be done later. What would be the cost of taking care of the issue that needs to be done and then pick up later on? Did we get it?
Just on the abatement of taking that ceiling out was just a $22,000 line item, but then you have to add in all the scaffolding that's required.
Mhm.
And you have to add in to take out the pews so that you can put in the scaffolding. So it's, the actual line item is $22,000 for the asbestos abatement. But then you'd have to add other factors.
But you gotta put a new ceiling in.
Yes, yes.
So what I'm asking is, take out the old, put in the new, and then hold off on,
Right. I don't have an accurate figure of that total amount, and I think that's...
can we break it down, is my question.
Yeah, I think, and that needs to happen with the contractor.
Can we get a number on that, and then we'll have to make a decision? I think it's important that we get the problem done, and then if we have to stay in here for another year, or whatever, but that will take care of that issue. That's where we're critical right now. So we need that number. I'd like to have that number.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. In a hallway discussion the other day between, I think we were talking about what Mr. Beresford's going to talk about later, is the park, the Etowah Park with the amphitheater, and then the trails, and then we've got the situation here, and you were asking which ones would you prioritize. I guess my question is, do we have certain monies already set aside for these three, or you said prioritize, meaning we can't have all three? So before we make a decision on one, which might eliminate the other two if there's only so much money to go around. So what I want to know, the procedure here is to, are we truly have to prioritize what we think is most important out of those three? Or are we in a position that we can work on all three? Or possibly do something like you suggested, to do part of this one so we can do some of the others? You asked me if I had a priority. I said it's either got to be the trails or the amphitheater. I'm fine up here for a while.
Does that sound like a finance or a city manager question?
Well, our CFO was projected that we'd have about $1.2 million in the current SPLOST program by the end of September, and we're collecting roughly in the range of $225 a month. So if you didn't spend any money between now and then, you'd probably be looking at close to $2 million around the end of the year. Now, if you have decided to forego the fire station, at least for the foreseeable future, you do have this $750 plus or minus. The trails cost is as of yet to be decided, determined. I know Mr. Beresford had gotten a quote from the Etowah Park contractor several months ago. Whether or not that quote is still a valid quote or not, I don't know. But Mr. Dyer and I and Mr. Ken and Jimmy and Mr. West spent about 5 hours on the trail yesterday morning, even in the early yesterday afternoon. And there is still some work yet to be determined on the exact route of that trail. We all know generally where the route will be, but the specific dimensions of property were what we were trying to focus on yesterday, so that Mr. Dyer could exercise whatever legal responsibilities he needed to exercise to be sure that we were on the right piece of ground and wherever the trail was built. And then, of course, there still is the open-ended question about what kind of finish we're going to have, what kind of trail we're going to have. Is it going to be hard surface or rock, non-hard surface? And so those are going to affect the cost as well. So all that is to say, we don't really know what the trails are going to cost. And we're going to do that in segments. So we're going to do that because the bridge, the pedestrian bridge, is currently being built at Etowah Park. The footings are in on both sides of the river, and the bridge is there. It simply has not been mounted yet. It's there in 3 gigantic pieces. I'm sure they'll bring in some sort of large construction crane to position that bridge, but the bridge itself is there. So as soon as that park opens, we need a stretch of trail open at least from Etowah down to Heritage at a minimum. And that's probably the easiest stretch of trail to construct because I think Mr. Dyer thinks that we already own most of the land, maybe all the land that would be involved there. With respect to the amphitheater, that's a question yet to be resolved. So.
Yeah. Am I correct, Mr. Wood, am I correct in assuming that we would be taking, if we do the renovation project, we'd be taking the money from SPLOST 6 general government buildings?
Yes, that's correct.
And we're only, what, a few months away from starting a new fiscal year, so you're gonna have approximately $2 million, the same amount of $2,200,000 it is available next year that we could plan if we decided to proceed this to be used from SPLOST 6 in fiscal year 2014, could we not?
Yeah, my reference to the year earlier was to the calendar year, and I'm sorry, I don't want that to be confusing, but in either case, I think with the fiscal year beginning in October 1, I think your number would be valid, yes, sir.
But one of the things that we need to be aware of is that we got a contractor on site that wants to do 2 out of the 3. And I think we lose some, Mr. Beresford best to address this, might lose some economic benefits to letting that pass with him leaving the site and asking him to come back. Maybe Mr. Beresford can address that.
I'll be more than happy to address it under J, new business.
Yeah, to the issue at hand, the renovation of the meeting room, it seems to me John's point is, or idea is a very good one. If we could get a new set of specs for simply going through the steps of completely repairing the ceiling, removing the pews, taking out the asbestos, putting a new ceiling in there, a fairly simple ceiling, and don't do anything else to the room. Maybe paint it where the walls are peeling and coming off, but just the minimum we need to get by. Then, if that's say half of 700,000, that frees up 350,000 for something else. Then we can live with that for indefinitely, as long as we've gotten rid of the hazard and fixed the ceilings.
The only thing I would invite you to think about would be this. If you think there's a likelihood that within the first half of the upcoming fiscal year, you would want to go ahead and fund the balance of the improvements to the assembly room. Relocating municipal court is not a simple deal. we appeal to the county. We cannot accommodate municipal court in this room. You get into the issue of prisoners and control of prisoners and access of bathrooms to prisoners, and it's a problem. So I'm not sure that once we get authorization, we have authorization now from the county to use county facilities. I don't know that we want to ask them to let us use county facilities twice in a short period of time. If Mark thinks from a structural standpoint, you know, we can continue to exist as we are. I'd almost rather see us wait and do it all at one time, because there are some other factors that have got to be taken into account at some point. And in particular, relocate. There are times, even though it's only sometimes once every 2 weeks or sometimes once a month for the larger court use, there will be several hundred people in that room, and we can't accommodate them anymore.
Well, I heard what Mark said. It's going to be, if it's not urgent now, it's getting close to urgent on that ceiling in that attic. That's already, pieces already coming down. But as far as us, the council moving in there, of course I won't be here, but I could meet here indefinitely. This is a fine room. Why spend any more money over there than we have to? Let's make that good and functional. If it's a reasonable cost savings. So let's agree. In fact, I'd like to make a motion that that's what we do, is direct Scott to come up with those specs, repair the ceiling only properly and permanently, and leave everything else like it is.
Mr. Mayor, to add to what Mr. Bryan, if we recall and go backwards on this whole project, we initially tried to do it without the services of an architect. And we did get bids come in. Mr. Patton, I don't know if he's here, but he could speak to that issue. And the bids that came in that were by and large just fixing the problem, even though there were problems with I guess there weren't bids, it was proposals or whatever it was. There were problems with the proposals, so we decided to discard them. But if I remember correctly, the monetary amount was around $250,000 relative to fixing the ceiling, painting. There was some painting issues, and basically doing the cosmetic that's required in there, and did not include any of the other issues or the other items if we were to move council chambers down there. So 250, I would think.
Mr. Mayor. Mr. Mayor.
Yes.
Thank you. The problem with that, or what that was called, was it was not spec'd out to the level that it is now. There was some major flaws in what they came back and made the bids on. So $250,000 is not a good number. I feel it's closer to $500,000 would be the good number. Then all the gingerbread comes in on top after it's done. So I want to see a number, fix the problem. That's the number I want to see. Then we'll address the other part. And if it's something we can say we can do, we'll put it together. If it's something we can't, well, then let's get the thing fixed properly and then hold on down the road. If we have to ask county 2 times, so be it.
Mr. Mayor? I think Mr. Patton had his hand up, that wanted to contribute something to that.
Mr. Mayor, council members, in regards to y'all's discussion about this and only fixing the ceiling versus moving ahead with everything, that sort of thing, you have to factor in the lights and that sort of thing with the ceiling, and what needs to be done with that, the cracks in the walls and that sort of thing. The original bid that was put out, there were mistakes that were made in the process in regards to requirements of state law. That did not include any of the work for DICE, AV system, refinishing any of the pews or the floors, that sort of thing, and all. But I wanted the council to be aware that, you know, just taking the ceiling down, putting the ceiling back up, you've got to look at the lighting and all of that, and when you do that, you've got all of those cracks in the walls and things of that nature that need to be considered in all. Mr. Dyer could address what Mark had talked about, value engineering with the two bidders in regards to dropping out certain things and come back with numbers on portions of it to present to the council.
I'd like to just add, the bid before, there was a bid range of 57%. Although we only had two bidders, they were within 1.6% of each other. And that's what I look for, is very tight, so that they know exactly what they have to do, and we spelled everything out. Now granted, we don't have to do all that stuff. There's new carpet, there's refinishing all the floors. We don't necessarily have to do all that stuff. So what we can do is go back to the low bidder, get a value engineering for exactly what Mr. Bryan was saying. And the only thing I would add is we do have to add a 10-ton HVAC unit, and we should do that as part of just the bare bones what we do. And then we can get these items and then list it out for you.
Well, maybe that'd be a good first step.
But you don't have to rebid it, that's the.
No, you don't rebid it.
We just go back and then, because it's there,
With
then
the
they'll just take
bidder.
things off.
Yeah. And then I'll do a new scope on it.
Thank you.
Did the low bidder meet every other
Yes, sir.
requirement?
They both did.
Did a requirement, okay.
Yes, sir.
Okay, anything else?
We had a motion, no second.
I withdraw.
Okay.
Could we, do we need an action, because I don't know if there'll be
There'll be some costs involved, I'm
Yeah.
sure. Right?
Cost of their engineering.
Well, there'll be some costs
It's
involved.
minor.
Here's what?
It'd be very minor from my end.
What's mine?
Well, we can figure out what my fee should have been on 700,000 worth of what I actually did.
Well, I think the process would be this, is they would value engineering, they're gonna bring a contract for you to approve or not approve. It's basically the next step.
So you wouldn't pay for the value engineering unless they got the contract?
Well, y'all would call it value engineering, but it's really taking things
A
out of
little
the.
of my time involved.
Right, he's gotta talk with the contractor and say, take this out, take this out, take this out, take this out.
Get them clear.
I got you.
Layman's options.
Okay.
We value architectural.
His time is gonna be deciding what can be eliminated and satisfy what you want done, which is the minimal structural improvement.
Yeah, but it may be such a little difference that you decide, there may be 5 additional items that get taken out. There may be such a little difference that you want to do like you did in the past.
Right, well then but you'll compare the 700 whatever to the 685, whatever, or 5, whatever it ends up being.
Okay. So do we need a,
I think there need to be a motion to approve Mr. Robart to go back to the contractor and value engineer.
So said.
motion and a second? All those in favor, signify by saying aye. All opposed? All those opposed, the motion, with the exception of Jack. Thank you, Mark. Where are we now?
New business.
Nothing on unincorporated islands, so.
Yeah, Mr. Rush is not here. Did he?
I'm not spared.
You're not spared on that one, okay. I suggest we just move that out, because I don't have any idea what, if he had data or other information.
Let's move to work session.
Move that to the following work session. Item B, discussion of appointment of Downtown Development Authority Committee, the DDA. The terms for Zach Kell, Rebecca Johnston, Stan Rogers, and Doug Key are ending July 1. But, you know, they'll continue to serve until they have either been replaced or reappointed. This was on the last meeting, obviously, and so I will ask what I was going to ask at that point, was that any of you that have nominations or recommendations, if you would send those to me, probably in the next couple of weeks or so, that should be in a position for the second meeting in July.
Have you spoken with these four? Is it going to be rolling off?
The DDA has agreed, and they have recommended that those be reappointed.
Would they accept it reappointment?
Oh, yeah.
Why,
That came at their last meeting, is what I understand.
why wait? Why don't we just go ahead and say, go for it?
Well, I think No, I'd like to wait in case if there's any other nominations, and at the next meeting, then we'll do what we need to do there. Okay. All right. Discussion of the fiscal year 2012 comprehensive annual financial report. James Spence was here at the last meeting, but I think he got delayed at this meeting for any discussion. If anyone has any questions or anything about that report, which you have had copies of, I think, then I'm sure Nathan or Mr. Wood would be happy to try to address them. And if need be, you know, we can get them to the Malden and Jenkins, and they could answer them. But does anybody have any particular questions about that? There's really no need for any kind of vote on that anyway. I mean, it is what it is, and seems to be, from what I understand, a clean opinion. So does anybody have any comments or questions? All right. Well, let's move along. Okay, we got discussion of the street improvements. Basically, what I wanted to say here is that some time ago, we talked about some of our streets that, you know, we got a lot of improvements that we need in the area of the streets and roads and bridges and so forth. But particularly, we have a number of our subdivisions that the streets were not completed. Some of them may have been listed, or we thought were private, or may not be private, and you go back and look at the site, the plans which were approved. We have a lot of needs as far as the streets goes. I mean, this could be really big money in order to repair all the streets in this city that need it. We talked some time ago, and I believe Ken, Mr. Patton, brought forth the streets that weren't completed, that didn't have the final topping on them, or needed some kind of repair, for which there was either some bond, no bond, or never had been a bond, or nobody even thought about it, you know. So we need a transportation plan for this city, a plan that we can then take and develop an improvement program. We need to take a plan for this entire city, and you know, I tell you, my guess is we're in not really good shape when it comes to how much it's going to cost to do what needs to be done. But we're going to have to start biting this off a little bit at a time, somehow. A lot of these streets that don't have the topping on them, in which there's a subdivision full of houses, I tell you, in my opinion, those streets are ours. Now, if we've got a bond on it, we may need to move forward and try to do what we can to finish those streets. If there's a developer still in there, maybe we need to pursue the developer and ask them to finish those streets out. Because I guess no one ever thought that when the subdivisions were being developed and they were holding off, they did all but the final coating there, that you know, things would just keep on moving right along. But when everything stops still, we can't leave unfinished streets for 20 years or longer. Who knows? I mean, we need a plan, and a plan that we can begin to implement. We need a program to do that. And my feeling is that, you know, nothing's cheap. You always got to get professional consultants and people to help you with these things. But that's what they're for. And I think it's beyond the scope of what our staff can do. But I think we need to be asking our city manager and others to begin to look to see if there are consultants that we could get that could help us look at an overall transportation plan, which would not only just do these streets, but it would also look at what the needs are for the future. Are there new roads that need to be constructed, or, you know, how will traffic move 10 or 15 years from now? But the street improvement plan needs to be started pretty quick, because we're getting further and further and further behind. And as you know, we're spending a lot of money here in a very short period of time. But that's all I want to say. I want everybody to be thinking about, how do we do that? What's the best way to do that? And I think the best way to do it is to have our staff interview and talk to some transportation consultants, particularly engineers.
We could do that relatively quick, yeah, I mean on a 24-hour basis, but I think we could do that in time to get some scope of responsibility parameters established and some costs, and present that to you as part of the budget process, if council would authorize us to directly seek those quotes from 3 to 5 qualified engineering firms. If we have to go develop the form RFP and advertise it and all that, which we don't have to do for professional services, but if that's what mayor and council want to do, I think we can do that and have that for you within this upcoming budget adoption cycle, if we can proceed that way.
Well, you know, we could do that based on statements of qualifications, basically, and, take 2 or 3 transportation firms, let them come in and make a presentation even as to what they would recommend in this line. And it wouldn't necessarily have to be just, it's not really a bid. If you look at the ones you feel most comfortable with that you think can do the best job for you. And you could select from those. The council could do that, or the staff could come back and make a recommendation, either one. Mr. Canton?
Yeah, I'm not against doing that study, but we have some streets that are within the city's responsibility or eventual responsibility that we should be looking at, in my opinion, ASAP. River Green, for example, has a very unique situation. Great Sky has streets along this line, but I'll address River Green specifically. A lot of streets that have not been top coated, some, and I think most, have bonds, but the developer has the responsibility to finish those streets and turn them over to us. Looking at the rumors of the current developer in that particular community, number one, he has left the community on building anything at this time. 2, he has sold out his interest, to what extent I don't know, to an investment company. 3, the rumor is this investment company is trying to offload blocks of lots to future builders. And based on those things, there's no incentive for that investment company that's controlling that community now to do any top coating. I've mentioned, and I don't know, Mr. Dyer, I haven't talked to Mr. Dyer about this, but Mr. Patton and I have talked about this. I'd like to look at these areas where we know we have a responsibility, whether there are streets, they are city streets that just haven't been dedicated. I'd like to do something quick on those and use every bit of leverage that we have to get the developers to finish it. For example, I mentioned the extent of going to River Green and putting a moratorium on building permits there. Don't let them build anything. Well, if that happens, they're not going to be able to sell blocks of lots, and there'll be an incentive on that investment company to fulfill their obligation and complete those streets so that the city doesn't have the responsibility to end up doing it. Now, I don't know if that's legal or not legal, but I'd be willing to try it. But as Mr. Dyer often says, is, if nobody challenges us on it.
Every community's been dealing with this. And so there are lots of different options available to us. And I think it's mostly just sort of deciding we're going to do something. You could put some communities have just said we're going to charge an extra building permit fee to each lot going forward to recoup the cost of putting the top coats on. There are things we can do. We just have to decide we're going to do something. So the other thing that's happening is, as these people are buying groups of lots, there's more willingness on the part of builders to top coat the area that helps them, because they've now realized it's a marketing factor. Our streets are finished, and so they're starting to be willing to pay for things. The investment company's not, but the guy who's actually going to sell a house might be willing to.
Yeah, but again, we don't know that the buyer is going to be sitting on those lots for 4 years just buying them because it's a cheap price and they eventually intend to do something and we sit there 4 more years with nothing happening. You
Well,
know,
I think our choice is we pay them and try to recoup the cost. 'Cause the ability to force somebody to do it is gonna be very, you gotta talk about going to court. And if they're bankrupt or they don't have any money, which is the case usually, so forcing somebody to do it is gonna be very difficult.
Yeah, but if we have a bond, we can activate the bond at that point.
Which we could, and we could collect on all the bonds, and that's a source of funds. My understanding, none of those bonds are gonna be enough to finish the work, but,
Yeah.
because it was,
And the
they were
longer
all
we wait,
maintenance.
the less they're gonna be able to.
Well,
pay.
they were maintenance bonds and not performance bonds, and so they're only some maintenance amount, most of them, so.
Well, we need to, you know,
need to do
if there's a developer still doing anything, you know, we need to make sure if we go back and we have to do some of the improvements or paving, top coating or whatever, and we should certainly make note of that, and if that developer comes back at some point and reimburse us before they start building somewhere else in the city.
Well, we also, if we do have bonds, just make sure that we start acting right now, and that could be started tomorrow.
Yeah, absolutely.
We need to
Yeah,
talk.
that's what I'm saying. Well, I just want to throw some of this stuff out, because this week, it came out gangbusters some long time ago, and we got going with it, and then we got off on the other issues, and now it's going to keep coming back up, and we need to address it somehow.
Mr. Mayor, we did have a critical list, because we knocked
Right.
off 6 streets, I think it was 6, that we took care of, and we had additional streets on there that were already identified. But I think we do need to get the consultant.
We need that updated.
So we need to have that come in, and let's get that going, because it's not gonna change, it's not gonna improve. And while we're sitting here, we could be losing some other people walking away, as out there at River Green, individuals gonna try to duck and dodge, and, can't have that.
I agree.
If we decide to do it, we need to do it quickly, so just as John said, they'll come in and try to get under the wire.
So would it be your pleasure to ask Mr. Wood to go ahead and
So
start
moved.
some
Yes.
discussion?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. We have a motion to do that?
I'll make motion.
Second. Okay.
Second.
Those in favor, aye?
Aye.
Opposed, no? Okay.
We'll do it. That's
All right. All right, the discussion of the election call resolution, we are required to have this resolution. And so I will read the resolution so that everyone will know what is involved here. Now therefore be it resolved and ordained by the mayor and council of the city of Canton that whereas the city of Canton desires to comply with all state election laws, and whereas the city of Canton general election will be held pursuant to state law on Tuesday, November the 5th, 2013, from 7 a.m. until 7 p.m. at all City of Canton voting precincts. And whereas the Cherokee County Election Division will be responsible for the City of Canton general election on November the 5th, 2013. And whereas early voting will begin 21 days before the election at Cherokee County Election Division, located at 400 East Main Street, Canton, Georgia, phone number 770-479-0407, and 7 days prior to the election, early voting will be held at Cherokee County Election Division and Woodstock Public Library, 7735 Main Street, Woodstock, Georgia, from 8:30 until 5, Monday through Friday. And whereas the mayor and council do hereby appoint City Clerk Susan C. Stanton to serve as qualifying officer for the 2013 general municipal election, and whereas qualifying for the November 5th, 2013 City of Canton election will be held at Canton City Hall and will begin on Monday, August 26, 2013 at 8:30 a.m. and end on Friday, August 30th, 2013 at 4:30 p.m. for one office of City Council in each of the wards 1, 2, and 3. And whereas qualifications to run for council for the City of Canton are, must be at least 21 years of age, must be a registered city voter, shall be a resident of the ward they wish to represent for at least 6 months prior to the election, shall be a resident of the City of Canton for at least 1 year prior to the election, shall continue to reside in the City of Canton during their term of office. Whereas according to Georgia Election Code, Section 21-2-31, qualifying fees shall be set at 3% of the total salary paid in the preceding calendar year. Qualifying fees for the November 5th, 2013 election are $63. And whereas all elected offices of the council are for 4 years. I need a motion to adopt that resolution.
So moved.
Second. Have a motion and a second. Any other discussion or questions? If not, those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. All members voting for the motion. The early voting, the 21 days, so Susan and I figured that out, that should begin on October the 14th. Okay, action on budget amendment to allow truck purchase. That, I think, had come up, well, once before.
Well, it was addressed in the management letter of end of May and was scheduled for discussion and action at the last meeting / not meeting, so.
I'm assuming that, let's see, did it ever come up before the council?
It was on the agenda at the last meeting.
So let's be the first reading instead of the second reading.
Unless you want to call that a first reading, because we have a meeting.
Yeah, no, this doesn't require a budget amendment, I don't think, because it's just shifting money within that department.
So should we?
We just need authorization to proceed with buying a truck.
Well, actually, you did have a budget amendment.
Actually, there's a budget amendment in here, I think.
You do have,
Well,
from the last
Do
meeting.
we need a budget amendment, Nathan, to move from one line item to the other? If we don't go over his bottom line?
Because it's over $10,000.
Okay.
so I guess we
We
did.
do have this ordinance.
Well, we did have a meeting last time, and it was on the agenda.
Yes. Let's call it a second.
We have the second reading. Do we have a motion and a second?
Yes, motion.
I have a motion and who made the motion here?
Either one.
All right. Mr. Beresford made the motion. Mr. Goodman seconded the motion to approve the budget amendment to allow for the truck purchase. Any other discussion? If not, those in favor?
The only point to bring out, this is a replacement of an existing truck that is no longer usable. It's a 1992 vehicle that we've been stretching for so long, just to make that as a, on the record.
Okay, any other discussion? If not, those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. All members voting for the motion. Discussion of waiver of building permit fee for the reservoir office building. It has been my understanding that the contract that was signed stated that the contractor was to pay all licenses and fees. I believe that's what Mr. Wood indicated to me. So is there a question now?
Me.
Well, apparently it was in the contract, from what I understand.
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to make the motion that we do not approve the waiver.
Second.
Have a motion and a second that we do not approve the waiver. Any other discussion? If not, those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. All members voted for the motion. Let's see here now. Okay, now. Discussion of a tap fee waiver for Badcock Home Furnishings. This is something that we have had some discussion with the Badcock Home Furnishings requester, I guess, the one requesting the waiver, and it's not quite as simple as it appears. It looks like that basically they are required to have like an 8-inch. They had an 8-inch tap. This is for a new construction of a building just on Highway 20 West, just before I guess you get to Teasley Middle School, but on the opposite side of the road, on the south side of 20. The tap that the need that required the large tap basically is for fire protection, for a sprinkler system. It appears that our rates, all they need is a 3/4 inch line basically for the water that they use there, which has 2 restrooms in the building. Our rate structure apparently does not differentiate between having a tap for fire protection versus a tap for water to use, that you actually use. And it appears that this is somewhat out of line with both Cherokee County Water and Sewer Authority and the and Woodstock and others. I think Mr. Cumming has some information on that. Go ahead.
I'd like to make the motion that we put this, that we don't even decide this tonight, that we put it on hold and make a decision prior to issuing a CO, or prior to them getting a CO. Even though we're not issuing the CO, we can control whether it gets issued. That we put it on hold and we take a look at it. There appears to be significant inequities on this tap line. And the problem is exacerbated because they're dealing with a water and sewer line that belong to the city, and yet it's a county property. The 8-inch tap going into a large shopping center, for example, that is feeding a multitude of buildings throughout that infrastructure, we charge the same fee as an 8-inch tap to a single building that I understand is going to have a project cost of $600,000. Or we are at approximately 12 to 15% by the time we get through of tap fees charging of the whole project cost. There seems to be an inequity there. Now Woodstock, from my information, charges $5,000 for under the similar circumstances. There is a county, if you look at and the problem is we're not comparing apples to apples. If you go out to the county will tell you they charge $204,000 for the same thing. But they provide the meter and I believe the container where all of the concrete encasement where it goes. Not all the deals, but this meter is significantly expensive. We're doing nothing on this project other than having supervised the actual movement of a pipe or boring underneath Route 20 and going to the fire hydrant that's on the other side on county property. We need to look, as we investigate water and sewer rates, we need to look at the other charges that we're assessing and make sure that they're equitable. And all I'm asking is we put this on hold. The owner understands that this is on hold, that we're investigating it and looking at it, and we're trying to arrive at an equitable fee structure if we determine that what we're doing is not equitable.
Right.
And the owner is here, if you don't mind him coming.
Right. I believe that they understand that we wanted to look back at this, and I'd also, in a few minutes, I'd like to ask Joby and David Hatabian to maybe give us a little better clarification of the situation. But I think the only thing the city basically would be doing, or UP would be putting in the meter and 3/4 inch line, right? 3/4 inch meter, I guess, for your use. But we have no other cost, and yet it was, what was our tap fee? $42,000 or something like that.
Question though, are they going to have a sprinkler system, and does that sprinkler system require the 8-inch?
It requires 6, I believe.
I think the fire hydrant is what called the 8-inch, isn't that correct?
Yes, sir. We're being, we're in the county, we go by the county fire, review of the building. And anytime we set a hydrant, we need a hydrant within 500 feet of the building for sprinkler. And there's no hydrants on that road until you get further up to the subdivision or all the way up to the intersection of 5 and 20. So we had to set a hydrant. Anytime you set a hydrant, you have to have an 8-inch line to the hydrant in case you ever extended on the other side of the road to another hydrant.
Are you moving from a location within the city to a location outside the city?
Yes, sir. This is the owner.
And you know, if you had moved from a location within the city to a location within the city, we wouldn't have had any of this problem.
I think I found that out.
But to go back to your question, the city actually has some lower recommendations for like you use a 2-inch combination meter for your fire protection, where the county only allows a 6-inch sprinkler system on commercial. His building's 16,500 square feet. They have like a 5,000 to 10,000 square foot threshold on that, and so it requires a 6-inch double detector check valve out at his sprinklers at the county line and city line there. And the hydrant is actually in the right of way, so it's in the county or Highway 20's right of way. And that's what caused the 8-inch line to be brought over, because we would have tapped only a 6 for his sprinkler system, but since it has to have a hydrant there for them to pump into the fire department connections to activate the sprinkler system, they require that 8-inch valve. But there'll be no water consumption at all unless there's a fire. His 3/4-inch meter will meter all his used water, and he is tied to the sewer system. So, he'll have sewer fees also. And he has sewer tap fees that he's paying for $1,100 per 1,000 square feet.
What about the possibility of annexing the property into the city? Would that be something you'd be interested in, or is that feasible?
I'm not sure.
I wouldn't help them at this point, I don't think.
And I'm not sure about the contiguity of it.
They've already done the costly work, I think. The boring under the road with an 8-inch, they've already done all that. And now our tap fee is higher than the other jurisdictions, so that wouldn't benefit them. It'd benefit us from a tax-based standpoint,
Yeah, we kind of brought up as a discrepancy between other jurisdictions. They just don't, it's kind of like it fell through the cracks when maybe the city had its own water department and they actually installed a meter for $42,000, like you're saying. And everybody else has a separate category for fire protection connection, where y'all is just an 8-inch, call it a tap. And we did tap the line. We paid $35,000 to bore the road and set the DEC and everything. And the counties is like $7,500 for the same tap. They give you the meter, which is about $6,000. So their fee is about $1,500 to tap it. For the city of Woodstock, they don't supply you with the big meter. They just charge you $5,000 for fire protection connection.
How much did you say the county meter was?
For the DDC or for the 8-inch?
No, for the 8-inch, how much would the meter be? How much would the meter cost from Cherokee County, just the meter?
It's attached to that waiver request.
No, yeah, right, no,
$204,000.
No, I'm asking how much the meter itself cost.
Of that $204,000?
Yes, sir.
I don't know exactly. I didn't investigate. That's a water meter. That's different than the fire department connection. The double detector check valve is different.
I was wondering if you took the cost of the meter out of the 204, how much you'd be left with.
Yeah, I see what you're saying here. I'm not sure. There again, that's like Mr. Cummings said, it's not really based on water consumption. That would be taxing your treatment plant more, because they are actually using a large flow of water for that 8-inch meter.
Go ahead. I guess the motion was only that we put this in hold because we really need to look further into this. They haven't been made any commitments, and I wouldn't want to decide one way or the other, because I don't think we have sufficient information as to whether we're assessing this charge correctly or if there's inequities in what we're doing. I think we need to look at it, and we're not saying yay or nay to what their request is. We're putting it on hold, and they know it's on hold, and they know that they could be subjected to the total amount if we come back and say that's what it is. But I think we at least owe it to them to take a look at it, because they've brought out very different circumstances than maybe what we're normally faced with in this condition.
Sure. And what you can tell them what you brought on.
Yeah, we talked about this the other night, doing the letter,
Right.
requesting a review and everything from there, I did bring your letter.
Right, that letter, basically, we had asked him to bring a letter to, requesting that we do just put this on hold and not, not hold them up in their construction or anything, but not, have this resolved as soon as we can, but certainly before they would be able to get a CO on it and work with the county.
We need to add.
Well, that's what we need to do. We got two professional engineers sitting right back there and, well, I think they're reasonably professional.
We're gonna be having some very in-depth discussions as part of the budget process on our rate structure. Of course, we've got the $7.5 million loan that we're gonna have to make some determinations on what effect that's gonna have on the rate structure. So as part of that process, we'll try to have whatever information you need to determine whether or not our rate structure applicable to these types of projects is where it should be or where it is that you think it should be.
Well, Mr. Mayor?
Yeah, Lonnie?
Just wanted to bring up too, I've done a 5-year study on the water that we've used, and our water bill for the last 5 years was $27 out of our facility, and I don't see how that would be like a larger facility with 150 employees. You now pay the same exact water tap fee as that company does there, and we only use very limited water.
If you would, leave that letter with this clerk there, okay, and then, if y'all go ahead and sit down, unless someone else has, you have a question, I'm sorry.
Let me sit down, I just want to say that, let's have research, and also I'd like to have Ken sit in on that for his point of view too, so that at our work session, that study can be brought back and then we can look at it and then move ahead with that. So request is have the engineers and Ken.
Yeah, that was what we're second motion.
Okay.
Okay, those in favor signify by saying aye. Those no? Okay. I would like for Joby and David to come up just a minute. We don't want to take but just a minute, but I want to make sure that what we're seeing there on those rates do and they feel need attention, and how we should go about maybe making sure they are in line.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. Basically, what they told you was true. What we saw, they were required to have a fire hydrant near their building to meet fire protection code. Therefore, whether they were in the city or the county, either one, they would have had to install that fire hydrant or under Highway 20. Right now, with the way I understand it, with their different requirements from the county to the city, if we allow them to use a modified, what they call, I think, a R13 system, which requires a significantly smaller tap than what the county would require to supply their sprinkler system. To me, just blindly saying they have to charge them for that tap, it doesn't seem quite equitable, is my opinion.
David, I know you've been around a lot of water systems, sewer system and all that, but does our rate structure there on those taps, does that seem reasonable? That you would charge the same for a fire protection tap as you did for one that went into a subdivision and served 50 homes?
There's some imbalance there. What's the right rate? I don't know, but I don't know. $42,000 for a fire hydrant seems a little much.
Okay.
I don't have a whole lot of comparisons to others.
Okay. So what should be the game plan here? What should be the
We're going to put it
procedure?
on hold because we have to go.
Yeah, we got it on hold.
We go through the budget process, we're going to be discussing these particular things along with the water rates, I would assume.
But I would assume that you would need to give some sort of direction to somebody to check these rates out, and compare them with others to figure out whether we're in line or not, which you will do, I'm sure.
Yeah, are you saying, Dave, are you saying that if this project had been developed inside the city limits, the connection standards or requirements would have been less?
That's what Joby said, I think. Joby said that it would be a little less, right?
That's the way I understand it. Brad, do you have an opinion on that?
That's correct, because the city will allow a smaller sprinkler system, doesn't require as big of a line.
That's right.
They would still require the 8-inch tap to get the hydrant within the hose lay distance of the back of the building, but the tap to the double detector check valve can be done with a 2-inch line instead of a 6 in the city. That's the difference. But we would still have to pay an 8-inch tap fee because we brought an 8-inch line over.
It would have been necessary, whether they were in the city or not, to get that hydrant over to his side of the road, near enough to all four corners of the building. Had that hydrant been there, the line been on his side of the road, their largest line would have been the 2-inch fire connection. And that would have been what their tap fee was based on for that particular connection. They would have had the other 3/4 connection on top of that as well for their domestic use.
So we're gonna get a recommendation from staff.
Yeah. Back to
Yeah.
right.
We'll look at it and try to make it a part of the rate discussions, yeah.
Okay. Thank y'all. Appreciate it. Okay, discussion of landfill closure contract amendment due to the dirt issues.
We've got dirt problems to the extreme. We've got some dirt that we've got far too much of to render a property useful, and we've got a need for dirt somewhere else, but it's not the right kind of dirt. So we've got dirt problems again to the extreme. Burke and Murph is here, as well as Dave Ken, Jimmy, and Joby West. Bottom line is, we have a landfill. We're in the process of trying to close that landfill. A couple of years ago, we engaged the firm of Stantec to assist us in that process. EPD is, this is an EPD requirement. It has been an ongoing process for the past year plus. Mayor Hopgood and I both met with the Stantec folks and I believe with the contractor maybe a year or so ago. Our staff thought that we had a supply of dirt that met the right permeability requirements, the right clay components, that we could use as capped material to close that landfill. We began to work with that assumption and with that application, and EPD has basically said that the material that we're using is not meeting those permeability requirements. And so the bottom line is we're going to need to acquire some other dirt. And the two closest locations that have been identified thus far are in Tate and Cartersville, where there are supplies of this particular type of dirt. Burke, have I stated that correctly?
Yes, sir, you have.
Still in the 80 plus or minus $1,000 range. Is that we do? Let me say one other thing. We have awarded a contract for this closure to is it Nolan?
Yes.
To Nolan Construction Company. But part of that contract, I'm not sure about the particular language, but basically said we would supply the dirt, and they were to achieve the correct compaction on that landfill. That was their responsibility, to place the dirt and to compact the dirt to certain compaction levels. But that again is assuming that our dirt met the permeability requirements. And so we've got the contractor basically on hold until we can supply the right material for them to finish the job.
According to what I have, I don't have a copy of the contract, but Nolan was given the contract, I believe, and the bid amount was $61,310 and change. But there was a contingency amount in this contract for $13,590, and the exact wording I have in this Stantec letter does is the contingency amount is to be used in anticipation of additional fill material to complete the grading operations. So where does this come into relative to what costs we're going to incur? Because the way I read this, we've already got $13,590 to pay for whatever additional dirt we need. Now, do we need $23,000 worth of additional dirt, or how much do we need? But the way I read it, they're supposed to be supplying up to $13,509 worth of dirt.
Yes, sir. That was correct. The existing stockpile that's on site that was determined is not usable, not suitable. Roughly is about the size, the width of this room, the length of this room, and twice as high as this room. That was already on site. That was not enough at the time to perform the cap that is required by EPD. So that was contingency, was to anticipate the additional dirt that would be required to haul in. And that was an alternate bid amount for the contractor, and that was how that price was determined. But now we cannot use the plus or minus 3,400 cubic yards that were available on site because the permeability of the soil will not meet EPD's requirements.
Why didn't, excuse me if I may, why didn't we know that at the time we were letting the contract whether or not that particular soil was usable? I mean, I would think that would have been a normal soil test to determine that we got this big mound of dirt, whether or not we could use that dirt, or if it met EPD requirements.
There was a soil test done, and the area that tested proved to be encouraging. However, that my understanding is that stockpile actually came from 4 different sources, and as fate would have it, the other 3 sources are not what we needed. Is that also correct?
Yes, sir. Basically, the existing stockpile was not uniform throughout. So basically, if you can imagine an area the size of what I described, and the test hit the sweet spot, the good soil, and it was not uniform, and that was not discovered until the contractor actually started to excavate the soil and move it around.
Is there some other way of putting some type of shield down before the dirt goes on top that would assist giving the protection that EPD wants?
Yes, sir. We looked at 2 alternatives, basically. One is to haul in suitable soils and put a 2-foot cover cap over the landfill. The other alternative was to install a liner and a ventilation system for the methane that would be trapped under the liner. And those are both acceptable means by EPD. We obtained through the contractor, Nolan Contracting, costs associated with each. And it was determined that hauling in the soil was the least cost associated with that alternative.
How much money is it?
How much money?
If they determine the cost, what is that cost?
80 plus or minus. Is that correct?
Actually, I would like to refer that to Mr. Jimmy and Mr. West to update you on the costs associated with this.
I'll go ahead and start. Where I see we stand, we have run into this problem, we've decided, let me first tell you, we tested the dirt at Laurel Canyon to see if it would be sufficient, but it was found to be way too sandy. The total cost we came up with, looking at all options, I went back and asked Stantec to give us a price to complete the job, everything that could be associated, as nearly as possible to accurate. We're thinking the total cost to finish this project is going to be about $144,000. Out of the money we've got budgeted already for this fiscal year, we have $33,000 remaining. We're looking at an additional cost to finish the project. To EPD satisfaction, within reason, without any major unforeseen. Bert can stress to you how I stress to them. We don't really want any more surprises, and we want to look at anything that could come up. We're thinking around, we've got a number of $111,000 to finish the project, and we would ask that you allocate us, if you choose to finish the project and close it out, to allocate us somewhere between $111 and $120 to finish the project.
Joe, but let me ask you this, regardless of what the number is, we don't have that budgeted. and we don't have anywhere to get that except for sanitation funds. Now, we may have enough in sanitation fund monies ultimately to get that. We don't have it budgeted. Is there enough of a sense of urgency? In other words, can this stay on hold until we get through with the budget process and resume it October 1, or is it a matter of such urgency that there need to be budget amendments before then?
I would consider that it would be necessary to go ahead and finish, because the contractor's out there, he's got some equipment on the job. If he moves off with grass and reseed the area, and he has to move back in, we came up with, I think, it costs around $20,000 if we shut it down now and pick it back up later. Is that correct, Bert?
That's correct. That would be the grassing that's
More
involved.
than what I have asked.
Because you were going to go ahead and include the erosion control measures to make sure that all the soil, because it's bare now, doesn't run off site and will cause more construction later on.
I don't think we got a choice but to do something on this. I mean, it's gotta be done, I suspect. The question is where the money will come from.
If it comes from sanitation, then I think we make that work. Nathan, that put you a little bit on the spot. Don't we have some monies in the sanitation fund that could be applied to this?
I believe we can make that work.
Is that a budget amendment?
Yes.
It would be a budget amendment, yes,
Okay.
If council directs us to proceed, we need to be sure that.
We've got a choice.
Well, if there's a
Motion to
choice.
amend the budget, the amount requested.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any other discussion or questions? If not, those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. All members vote for the motion.
That amount is classified as 120.
It's not to exceed 120. Is that okay with everybody, not to exceed 120?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, update on the Etowah River Park and a discussion of first reading of the Etowah River Budget Amendment. Mr. Ferris.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. First of all, like it's touched on earlier, and I would like to give an update on the park situation. Yes, we do have the pilings in for the bridge. They are curing out for 30 days. And we're looking right now around the middle of July for the big crane to come in, lift up the bridge, swing across the river and put it in place. Required a 30-day curing because we really want to make sure that when we drop that kitty, it doesn't cause problems. The bridge is out there. It is a fantastic looking bridge. It's in 3 parts as referred to earlier, but it's also being put together. It will be in one piece when they're ready to lift it and put it in place. The easel over here shows you a couple of things. I can refer to the elliptical circle around. The concrete sidewalks are in place. There is an area that we're discussing right now that is a swampland, a marshland, a wetland, that is going to create a little problem. We're looking at an alternative on that, but that's something to trade off one for the other. Also, the curbing for the parking lot is in, and they've got earthwork moving right ahead. Every time it's a dry day, next day it's a rainy day. It's a major mud hole down there, but things are moving. We've got the underground electrical systems throughout the park in place, and it won't be long we'll be putting in irrigation systems where it's needed. The issue at hand right now is the amphitheater, and that was one of the alternatives we had for the bid. and it was item number 6, alternative number 6. It came in, they were low bidder for the park, but also they were low bidder for the amphitheater, which turned out good. I don't want to interrupt you guys.
Well, we appreciate that. Let's go.
Go ahead, take your time. We're setting a new record here anyway.
I mean, I'm here as long as need to be.
Okay. As I was saying, alternate number 6, they came in with the lowest bid of $291,161.10 for the amphitheater. What they have said, that as long as they're on site, they'll honor that bid. So it becomes an issue that we really would want to be able to accomplish and get this set in. Let's clear that one up, and then I'll go back to the trail issue. I would like to make a proposal. It turned out that it's going to have to be a ordinance change, and they're ready to move ahead. The foundation, or the sub bases, everything's are coming right along, and the quicker we can get an answer back, the better off it will be. My feeling is ordinance, resolution, or just say go ahead, because it's going to be something that we need to get accomplished. The good folks out here could come up and look at this after the meeting if they'd like, but that particular structure is going to be the crown jewel of the park. As you drive in, you will see that. Also, there is a big lawn out there where we can have venues, people come in and see shows, etc. So I think it's something that we really need to move ahead on. I would like to make a motion that we follow through with it being an ordinance. We have to advertise this thing for 3 weeks or whatever that is. No?
What I would assume is that we would consider this the first reading, and then that's what was on here, right?
Hey, I want to get it done.
Well, I mean, this is what it said, first
Well,
reading.
Okay. It says because there was kickback. Yeah.
It's a bad word.
Yeah, it is bad. There was a kickback from you and Mr. Cummings that have concern of how this motion was brought forward. Yes, sir. It was a kickback on how this was brought forward. It had to be an ordinance. I had it as a resolution, but it can't be a resolution. But if that's what it is, I want to know how quickly can we turn this around and get this approved? That's the question.
I was told by Mr. Wood that a resolution was satisfactory. And I told the city clerk that, in fact. And so I don't know where you get your kickback, but that's okay.
Well, then let's change it to a resolution and let's move it on.
Go ahead.
For my opinion, we're taking it out of contingencies. And it's, in essence, no difference than the budget amendment ordinance that we did for the $118,152 at the time we went ahead and did the bridge. So it's basically the same set of rules follows. Now, did we require an ordinance, a budget amendment ordinance, when we approved the bridge? I don't know. But to my mind, we're taking it out, we're changing the usage from an undefined usage to now an item that we never budgeted. But forgetting all of that, my biggest issue is that we sat here not too many moons ago, probably a year ago, and if I remember correctly, we were going to seek out this to be donated by, I think, Northside or Wellstar or some medical facility, and I wonder what have we done in terms of trying to get this
I'll be
donated?
more than happy to answer that, sir. What we've done, I've contacted different ones. Their response is, it's an advertising vehicle. What is your foot traffic? How often are you going to have a venue there? How often are you going to have a number of people? We need a head count. We don't have that. Therefore, we can sit back and wait 5 years, have half a park, and then have.
So
no
they
fixed
have
traffic.
told us no, is what you're saying?
They told us, well, okay, I'll say it. They said no.
Well,
I did speak to, John spoke to several people, and I spoke to them too. But what they're saying is no until they see it in place. You know, they may want to do that, but they want to know how much advertising they're going to
You
get.
build it and maybe we'll donate.
Well,
Is that what you're saying?
Well, no, they say they want to be part of it, but they want to know more about it.
Well, let me say this, excuse me, I did speak to a representative of the possible donor there, so to speak, or contributor. And I have asked that, plans and costs be, they asked for plans and costs. What is it, what's it gonna cost? That has been forwarded to them, very recently, in fact. I think we ought to wait for an answer on it. I think we ought to wait and see, at least a reasonable, short period of time. But, before we do that.
The second point, which I didn't get to, is that we're not considering, as we do these things, the impact that it has after we complete its construction. For example, Mr. Kanjimi is requesting a significant increase just to maintain that park. If we do this amphitheater now, and believe me, I love the idea, but we're not considering how are we going to pay for the venues that go in it. We're not considering what maintenance impact that's going to have on future budgets. All of these things, in my mind, should be thought out. The third point that I have is that we have significant other issues in the city. We're currently conducting a parking study. If the results of that parking study comes back and says we need to put in a parking deck for 200 cars, that's $3.2 million. Now, are we going to wait 3 years to do that because we're using this money now? It's a nice thing to have, but it's not necessarily a need that we need to fill. We have inflow and infiltration problems in our wastewater treatment plant. We took $300,000 out of our stormwater to put it into the park. In my opinion, that $300,000 would have been better spent addressing the inflow and infiltration. We have a streets issue, which we don't have a clue in the world what it's going to cost us. And we're building nice things to have. I can't concur with doing this until we know what our total infrastructure impact is going to be because we've neglected it. Until we know how much this is going to add to our budgets. I spent some time with Mr. Wood today looking at the budgets. We're looking in areas of 22% increase in public works. Now, not all of that's contributed to this park, but a good portion of that money is because we're increasing our day-to-day operational costs in doing these nice things. And I just don't think we're far enough along. Whether he's going to leave or not leave shouldn't be the primary motivation, in my opinion. It's the entire cost and impact that building this structure right now will have on us.
Commissioner, last year, actually first part of last year, the park thing came up. I met with you and I asked you to appoint a committee for the park, Etowah River Park. And you said, no, I don't think so. And I said, I think we need to have a committee to work on it, oversee it, work with the county. Now, you said, do what you want to do. You told me, do what you want to do. So I did, and I have. Oh, okay. I have. Every 2 weeks, I meet with them. I have followed through on this. Mr. Cummings dropped in on one meeting, maybe 2 meetings, and Mr. Huffman came to something. But I've been running programs. And, you know, all of a sudden now, you are telling me that you contacted somebody. It would have been nice if you'd have included me into that discussion, because I don't want to use the word spearheaded, but I've been putting a lot of hours, a lot of time, a lot of effort to bring this city an excellent park. And now you're saying at the last minute, oh, by the way, la-di-da. That's, where's this interaction that we're always talking about? It's the conflict of this council. It seems to carry over into these little cells. I would have said, bring it on. No, can't do it. I call the question, I'll take the lump, I'll take it right now. Call the question.
Anyone else have any comments? Okay. It's,
We're leaving it. I'm asking
he's wanting to spend $291,000.
No, he doesn't.
Well, okay, I'm sorry. How much you want to spend?
$291,840.
Excuse me, I'm sorry.
Well, this is
Missed that.
And it should not be an ordinance. It should be, as Mr. Cummings pointed out, and that's the point.
Actually, I think it should be an ordinance, but I'm
Well,
not gonna argue that.
okay, you guys came back and made a change. I had to change it. I didn't agree with it. Try to be cooperative. So I want the
I never
approval.
made a change, Mr. Beresford. I don't know where you got that. I never made a change. Now, you can say that if you want to. You never asked me about that, did you? No,
Well,
you
let me
didn't.
check.
But
No.
I do think it needs to be a budget amendment.
Well,
That's my opinion.
Make a budget amendment.
All right, well, we got first reading tonight then. First reading tonight. Thank you. We've had the first reading. Anyone else have anything to say? Okay, let's move on to the next item.
I had a motion with no second again.
Okay?
Well,
No
the
second.
first reading, you don't.
You don't need a motion on a reading anyway.
Okay, I got something else to say.
Oh, okay.
As usual, play the games, delay it, and the cost of this thing, and I know Mr. Cummings, you're talking about streets and parking garages. Well, yeah, this is this park. So,
Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
One last point. We sit down and we extensively budget.
I hope it is one last thing.
Well, I know. But I'm not a spender. But let's talk about unbudgeted monies that we've done this year, Mr. Beresford, and Mr. Huffman, and Mr. Bryant, that we've approved as council. You too, Mr.
Excuse me, Mr. Mayor, where is this on our agenda?
I believe
This is under
Is it on the
the
agenda?
approval of the money. We have spent in this park unbudgeted this year, 1 million, including this, if we do it, $1,054,000 that we didn't budget. $1,054,000 that we, a year ago, didn't even think about. A year ago, we made the absolute decision, the way we were gonna do this park. This council made the agreement that we were gonna have a base bid and we were gonna support whatever options in priority with whatever money was left over. We never stuck to that. We spent $300,000 from stormwater. We have spent from SPLOST 6, and it's not, I gotta take it back, that's not a correct statement that I said in this park. In parks, I should have said. We have spent $118,152 in the Etowah Park. We have spent $343,303 buying the Bluffs property, and now we're gonna spend another $291,840. That's $1 million of unbudgeted funds. We got a better plan. I think we're creating future operational costs, as I said previously, and I'm just doing that until we've got a good impact of where we stand on the needs of this city, not the nice things to have. I'd love to have this. I'd love to go down and listen to concerts, but can we afford it? Have we got money to do the other things that we need to do in this city? I don't think we do. We're using it up as fast as we're talking, and we're talking 22% budget increase for the public works. We're talking 22, these are requested, but 22% in the police department. We're gonna have a millage rate so high you guys won't even know where it's coming. I can't go along with spending the money. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, the next item on the agenda, action on condemnation of parcels on Main Street Connector Project. Doc?
This is the sidewalk improvements, of course, up from City Hall to Main Street. There's a deadline. We have to either have acquired the easements we need through closings or through condemnation before the next meeting. So what we need you to do tonight is two things. This item is to go ahead and approve the condemnation. Later on, we're going to talk about acquiring the properties by contract and closing, which is how we think it's going to happen. Every owner has indicated to us that they're going to do it, we're going to pay them, they're going to give us the easement, we're not going to have to condemn. So, but tonight we need to go ahead and approve whatever action we have to do, because if we don't acquire them one way or the other, we're going to miss out on being able to do the project. So the motion that I would request that you make is that you approve the condemnations orders for parcels 1 through 5.
How much?
Well, they're all less than $2,000.
Yeah, that's
We're talking about temporary easements and just easements.
Not to change. We
Yeah,
have a
no,
motion.
not big.
We have a motion, have a second.
Second.
All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, no. All members voting for the motion. Okay, you have anything? Okay, mayor's report. The only thing I was going to mention is that since our first meeting in July would fall on July the 4th, we will move that to July the 11th. And we'll end up having 2 meetings in a row there, but 2 weeks. But we need to go ahead and do that, I think, since it's better to be, I think, consistent with it being on Thursday.
Well, we have it on the 2nd.
What's that?
Well, we have it on July the 2nd.
I just felt like the 11th was fine. I could, you know, whatever y'all want to do.
It's a Tuesday. Okay.
Yeah. Okay, we need a motion to adjourn into executive session to discuss litigation and land acquisition. Motion and a second. Have a second? Who did the second? Second. Okay, all in favor?